Chapter 2866. However, at this moment, Supreme Ancestor Phoenix sighed and said, "It's not easy to cultivate to the sovereign realm because there are no extra resources for you in the Divine World City. Other than Night's Sorrow, no one can obtain resources in the Divine World City without fighting." Supreme Ancestor Phoenix sighed and said, "This is also one of the important reasons why I didn't want to bring you here." "It's okay, Supreme Ancestor. Night's Sorrow will get them enough cultivation resources." When everyone heard Supreme Ancestor Phoenix's words, they were a little disheartened. At this moment, Night's Sorrow promised. What he meant was naturally not to rely on his identity to obtain resources, but to obtain enough resources for everyone through fighting. "I believe you can do it." Hearing Night's Sorrow's words, Supreme Ancestor Phoenix nodded in relief and said, "This is also one of the reasons why I brought them here." Haha. Supreme Ancestor, don't worry. In the near future, all the Divine King present will advance to the Sovereign Realm. Although Night's Sorrow didn't know the details of the battle and resource allocation in the Eternal Supreme Realm, he was still confident in fighting. After all, although he was the Divine King, he already had the ability to fight against ordinary sovereigns. "We've arrived at the Divine World City. I'll bring the three of you to meet someone." At this moment, Supreme Ancestor Phoenix led everyone to the Divine World City. He split out a clone and took King Fire Phoenix, and the others away. His main body led Night's Sorrow, Jing Yun, and Wuling Fei to the City Lord Mansion of the Divine World City. "The Child of Destiny has been brought here." As soon as they arrived outside the City Lord Mansion, Supreme Ancestor Phoenix began to shout, "Quickly bring him in." A shout immediately came from the City Lord Mansion. "Come out and follow me in." At this moment, Supreme Ancestor Phoenix released Night's Sorrow and the others from the Space Grotto Heaven and had them follow him in. What a solid world. As soon as he was released, Night's Sorrow felt a majesty different from the Divine World. The world of the Eternal Sovereign World was simply too solid. Walking on the ground, Night's Sorrow could feel that even if he attacked with all his might, it wouldn't cause too much damage to the ground. This was unimaginable in the deity realm. In the deity realm, after becoming a divine king, he could even shatter the void, let alone mountains and rivers. Is this the Child of Destiny of the God world? Not only was he the divine king, but he also looked like he had never seen the world before. What a disappointment. Night's Sorrow had just opened his mouth when a discordant voice came from behind. There were originally 5 or 6 ruler realm cultivators eating in the restaurant opposite the City Lord's manor. The teasing Night's Sorrow was one of the handsome male cultivators. He was a middle hegemon. 10,000 Sword Sect, you weren't any better than the others when you came. Regarding this, Night's Sorrow did not say anything, while Supreme Ancestor Phoenix coldly glanced at him. After being glanced at by Supreme Ancestor Phoenix, the cultivator called 10,000 Sword Sect immediately continued drinking with an awkward expression. Drinking in the Eternal Sovereign World was a very extravagant thing. Today, they were drinking here, obviously waiting for Night's Sorrow's arrival. Waiting for Night's Sorrow to be brought into the City Lord's manor by Supreme Ancestor Phoenix. 10,000 Sword Sect said unhappily, "I originally thought that a ruler would join our team. Who would have thought that it would be such a divine king? The 2 girls beside him are not bad. He's just lacking a little bit." That's right. If a heaven-defying ruler appeared, it would be of some help to us. What's the matter with a divine king? Another hegemon said unhappily. Forget it, forget it. At most, we won't fight for that opportunity." The only female cultivator present also had an ugly expression. As soon as she finished speaking, the sovereigns present all sighed. They were clearly extremely disappointed. While everyone was drinking, Night's Sorrow, Jing Yun, and Wuling Fei were brought to the guest hall of the City Lord's manor by Supreme Ancestor Phoenix. Although the City Lord's manor was large, the structure was similar to the buildings of the Divine World. After arriving at the guest hall, Knight Sorrow saw a total of 10 Supremes sitting there. These Supremes were not inferior to Supreme Ancestor Phoenix. They were all legendary figures and extremely powerful. Among them was the Horn Clan's Paragon, whom Yi Xiang had met once. What's going on? The Child of Destiny that you mentioned is only at the Divine King's level. And it's a lower Divine King, what's going on? Knight Sorrow's gaze had just landed on Supreme Horn and he smiled at him. A cold and angry voice sounded on the spot. The person who complained was Supreme White Tiger of the Divine World. He was very strong, even stronger than Supreme Ancestor Phoenix. His status in the Divine World was very high. That's right, what can a Divine King bring about? By the time he's nurtured, it'll be too late. Supreme Ancestor Dragon also spoke. Ancestor Dragon, White Tiger, Ancestor Phoenix, and Black Tortoise, the 4 Supremes, had very high status in the Divine World, second only to the City Lord and 2 Deputy City Lords. At this time, the City Lord was missing, and the 2 Deputy City Lords were not around. Basically, the 4 of them were in charge of the overall situation. Supreme Ancestor Dragon's gaze toward Knight Sorrow was not as unfriendly as Supreme White Tiger's, but he was also a little disappointed. The 2 of you, don't get agitated first. Although Knight Sorrow has just broken through to the Divine King realm and is a lower Divine King, his true combat strength is already not inferior to ordinary sovereigns. I saw with my own eyes that he used his clone to kill a sovereign of the Dark Abyss. Now that it's his true body that came to the Divine World, his combat strength is definitely higher. Supreme Ancestor Phoenix immediately explained when he saw that some of the big shots present were dissatisfied. Actually, his status was not inferior to Supreme White Tiger and Supreme Ancestor Dragon. He was so polite because he wanted to give everyone a satisfactory explanation. Oh. A lower Divine King can fight sovereigns. If that's really the case, then he's really a talented genius. After hearing Supreme Ancestor Phoenix's explanation, Supreme Ancestor Dragon's gaze toward Knight Sorrow changed instantly. However, Supreme White Tiger said coldly, I'm afraid that no matter how strong a lower Divine King is, he can only fight a lower sovereign, right? Ancestor Phoenix, you should know what kind of genius we need right now. Those prepared resources are not as good as nurturing the Myriad Sword sect. Of course I know. However, the speed of Knight Sorrow's rise is far beyond the scope of your understanding. Although he's only a Divine King now, his room for improvement is incomparably huge, and his cultivation speed is extremely fast. If nothing unexpected happens, he will soon surpass the Myriad Sword sect's combat strength. As Supreme Ancestor Phoenix explained, his voice became colder. Therefore, we still need to give those resources to Knight Sorrow. I also agree to give those resources to Knight Sorrow. I've divined that he's our future. At this moment, Supreme Ancestor Horn also spoke up for Knight Sorrow. Supreme White Tiger continued to shake his head. No. In 100 years, our Divine World territory must fight for that matter, or our luck will definitely be exhausted. We must do our best to nurture the Myriad Sword sect, or we won't have any chance at all. Chapter 2867. When the White Tiger Sovereign had voiced his doubts, the Horn Sovereign had already sent a voice transmission to Knight Sorrow to explain the importance of those resources. Those resources were enough to raise a cultivator from a lesser sovereign to a peak sovereign. Moreover, these resources were obtained by the experts of the God realm by killing the invincible sovereigns of other realms. As long as one successfully absorbed them, even an ordinary sovereign's strength would increase greatly. These laws and essences were unique in the current God realm. They were not something that could be replaced by other resources to increase one's strength. Therefore, the Horn Sovereign and Ancestor Phoenix Sovereign meant that Knight Sorrow had to obtain these resources. As for the White Tiger Sovereign, he was worried that Knight Sorrow's cultivation was only at the Divine King's level. He would not be able to absorb the laws and essences of these invincible sovereigns within 100 years and grow to the strength they hoped for. The Myriad Sword sect was currently the most outstanding rising star in the god realm. They were already mid-level sovereigns. If they could absorb these laws and essences, they would steadily grow into a relatively powerful upper-level sovereign. Therefore, choosing the Myriad Sword sect was a mediocre choice, but it was relatively safe. As for the battle for karmic luck in 100 years, those who participated had to be below the supremacy level. They could be sovereigns or divine king, but any realm would send a sovereign team. Realms with good results would obtain a large amount of karmic luck. Realms with bad results would have their karmic luck compressed by the heavenly Tao. Normally speaking, as long as their karmic luck was about the same, there would not be too much of an impact. However, the current god realm's karmic luck was almost exhausted. If the heavenly Tao compressed their karmic luck, the result would be unimaginable. Therefore, they could not afford to lose this battle for karmic luck. That's him. Could it be that you want to fight him? After Knight Shang spoke, the white tiger paragon stared coldly at him, as if he wanted to see through him. The feeling he gave Yi Shang was that he was completely invulnerable. He was so strong that it made people feel like they couldn't go against him. Is this the true strength of a supremacy? Although the white tiger sovereign did not release his aura, Knight Sorrow still felt heavy pressure. He sighed in his heart and continued, Yi Shang has the intention to fight. If I can defeat an intermediate hegemon while at the Divine King's level, then won't the objections of Exalted White Tiger and Exalted Ancestral Phoenix be resolved? Oh. You do have some guts, but you are too arrogant. The Lesser Divine King defeated an intermediate hegemon. Are you overestimating yourself, or are you underestimating the experts of the world? The White Tiger ruler berated the Knight Sorrow before turning to the Ancestor Phoenix and saying, Is this the kind of useless, arrogant piece of trash you brought back? White Tiger Sovereign, I can understand why you thought so highly of the Myriad Sword sect. But you shouldn't have slandered Knight Sorrow like that. If he is trash, then you and the 10,000 Swords sect that you favor are worse than trash. Supreme Ancestor Phoenix wasn't angry at first. However, Supreme White Tiger actually used the word, trash, to describe Knight Sorrow. He was instantly enraged. You want to fight? Exalted White Tiger roared coldly when he saw that Supreme Ancestor Phoenix had actually insulted him in order to protect Knight Sorrow. At this moment, he was emitting a strong fighting spirit. Knight Sorrow, who was standing nearby, was clearly affected. However, he didn't make a sound. It's not a fight between you and me. It's a fight between Knight Sorrow and the Myriad Sword sect. Whoever wins will get those resources. What do you think? Supreme Ancestor Phoenix hadn't been angry with Exalted White Tiger at first, because the latter had been speaking from the perspective of the god realm. Now, however, he had turned into a personal attack. Furthermore, he gave off the feeling that he was purposely protecting the Myriad Sword sect. Right now, the Divine Realm's territory was already on the brink of life and death. As one of the people in charge of the Divine Realm's territory, if the White Tiger Sovereign was unable to treat the rising stars fairly and had selfish actions, it would definitely affect the overall situation. This definitely wasn't a good thing. Fine. Let's fight. If the Myriad Sword sect can't even win against a lower sovereign, then I have nothing to say. Exalted White Tiger glanced at Knight Sorrow, then sent a voice transmission to the Myriad Sword sect. Come over. Clearly, no matter who Supreme Ancestor Phoenix brought back today, there would be a fight. The Myriad Sword sect's appearance near the City Lord's mansion was long prepared. Okay. Lord Supreme. Inside the restaurant, the Myriad Sword sect received Exalted White Tiger's voice transmission. He immediately looked at the sovereigns present and said, Help me heat up a pot of wine. I'll be back soon. Okay. Brother Juan, we'll wait for you here. The sovereigns present didn't dare to follow Exalted White Tiger into the city lord's mansion without receiving orders. Thus, they could only wait outside. Ha! Exalted White Tiger didn't smile at the crowd. He turned and flew toward the city lord's mansion. They had just met, and he knew that Night Sorrow's cultivation was only at the lower Divine King's level. Thus, he was bursting with confidence. After arriving at the reception hall, Exalted White Tiger looked coldly at Night Sorrow, a disdainful smile on his face. However, he didn't send a voice transmission because he knew that everyone present was a supreme. If he sent a voice transmission on the spot, it would definitely be heard. Exalted White Tiger. This is Night Sorrow, the child of destiny who was brought here from the lower realm. Next, you will fight with him. The winner will be nurtured by the God Realm's territory. The sovereign's laws and essence are only the first part of the resources. After that, there will be various resources brought by the sovereigns. Do you understand what to do? After Exalted White Tiger explained the situation to Exalted White Tiger, he didn't introduce Exalted White Tiger to Night Sorrow. Obviously, he had neglected Night Sorrow's existence. Lord Supreme, I won't lose to an ant at the Divine King's level. Exalted White Tiger replied confidently. His gaze on Night Sorrow grew more and more unfriendly. At this time, Exalted White Tiger looked at Night Sorrow and said, Night Sorrow, I know that your strength has increased rapidly, but the sovereign's laws and essence are incomparably important. You must obtain them. As for the Thousand Sword Sect and the Myriad Sword Sect, they are all the same to you. There is no need to understand them. Yes. Lord Supreme, Night Sorrow understands. Although Exalted White Tiger and Exalted White Tiger were important figures of status and were rather secretive in various aspects, the smell of gunpowder still unconsciously spread. Night Sorrow replied to Paragon Ancestral Phoenix, then turned to look at the 10,000 Sword Sect. As far as he was concerned, although the 10,000 Sword Sect was strong, as a sovereign lord, he was lacking in boldness. Compared to someone like Sovereign Lord T&I, he was a bit lacking. Thus, the pressure he felt wasn't as great as he had imagined. Lord Supreme, where shall we exchange pointers? The sword at Exalted White Tiger's waist can't wait to be unsheathed. Chapter 2868. As far as the Myriad Sword Sect was concerned, Night Sorrow, a lesser divine king, wouldn't be able to cause any waves in front of him, no matter how talented he was. He would easily end the battle, and win in a very elegant manner. As for Night Sorrow, the so-called child of destiny, he would lose miserably. All the resources that had been prepared for him would fall into his hands. After obtaining those resources, the Myriad Sword Sect will become the #1 ruler of the God Realm. There were currently a few rulers in the God Realm who were stronger than the Myriad Sword Sect, but he seemed to be the most talented of them all. As long as he could advance to the level of a higher ruler, he would be able to crush everyone else. When he thought of the resources he would likely obtain, he couldn't help but smile. Just spar here. With so many autarchs here, you won't be able to cause any waves. The White Tiger Sovereign reprimanded the Myriad Sword Sect unhappily when he saw the greedy smile on his face. The Myriad Sword Sect was roused from his reverie by the White Tiger Sovereign's rebuke. He knew that what he'd just done wasn't right. He put on an act and gestured toward Night Sorrow, but said contemptuously, Night Sorrow, please make your move. Blades have no eyes. If I go too far, I'll have to ask you to forgive me. You don't even know how to pretend to be a gentleman. Have you cultivated until you've gone stupid? If you were in the God Realm, you would have been schemed against by some evil ruler long ago. Yishang took in the 10,000 Sword Sect's reaction and smiled without batting an eyelid. He replied, please. After saying the word, please, Night Sorrow released his own god domain. He no longer had the heavenly Samsara halberd, Tian Yun Bao, or the sky cloud staircase. Even his power of virtue was only half of what it was. However, after absorbing more than half of ruler Moxie's laws and essence, his strength had increased by a terrifying amount. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to kill the green-furred ruler of the Dark Abyss with just a clone. A divine domain is unexpectedly strong. When Knight Sorrow released his Samsara domain, Master Myriad Sword's expression changed. Although Knight Sorrow had yet to make a move, the 10,000 Sword sect suddenly felt as if they were being suppressed by 10,000 mountains when God's domain pressed down on them. That kind of feeling was definitely not brought about by an ordinary divine king. The master of the 10,000 Sword sect, who had been underestimating their opponent, suddenly became cautious. Resisting the pressure from Knight Sorrow's Samsara domain, he drew his sword and said, "Take out your divine weapon." "I'm going to draw my sword." Good. As expected of the child of destiny. Even though he has just advanced to the lower divine king, his divine domain is already so terrifying. Given enough time, his future will be limitless. The Horn Race's Prime, who was paying attention to the battle, nodded in satisfaction when he saw the battle before him. Before Knight Sorrow even moved, Master Wan Jian had already drawn his sword, proving that Knight Sorrow had the upper hand in the first round. Not bad indeed. Of all the people present, not even the lower divine king has such a terrifying divine domain. Ancestor Phoenix Prime also smiled, then looked at Prime White Tiger and said, "Have you ever seen a lower divine king who can suppress an intermediate sovereign with a divine domain?" I don't deny that Knight Sorrow's talent is high, and his foundation is deep, but what we lack is time. There is no time left for him to grow. As for the 10,000 Sword sect, it's different. As long as the resources are in place, they will definitely reach the peak of the sovereign realm within 100 years. Although Prime White Tiger admitted that Knight Sorrow's foundation was astonishing, he still didn't agree. He still felt that the 10,000 Sword sect was the most suitable choice. At this moment, Yi Shang, who was looking at the 10,000 Sword sect, patted his chest and said, "My body is a divine artifact. Draw your sword." Although he didn't have a divine weapon, he was very confident in the strength of his body. Moreover, Knight Sorrow could sense that although Master Wan Jian wasn't weak, he was only slightly stronger than the green-furred sovereign of the Dark Abyss. Moreover, his combat experience wasn't very rich. Although he was fighting empty-handed, he still had a chance of winning. How laughable. You dare to be arrogant in front of a powerhouse. My 10,000 Sword sect will teach you a lesson today. You will realize that a divine domain doesn't represent everything. Under the interference of Knight Sorrow's divine domain, Master Wan Jian felt as if he had sunk into a swamp. His speed was severely affected, but he still had the confidence to win. He didn't believe that a lower divine king could take care of everything and not lose to a sovereign in any aspect. Thousand Feather Flower Burial Sword. Master Wan Jian, who had also released his divine domain, roared and used a sword move. As soon as Thousand Feather Flower Burial Sword was used, thousands of white feathers and thousands of red petals appeared in the void. These feathers and petals looked breathtakingly beautiful. However, in Knight Sorrow's opinion, this move was definitely not simple, because it contained terrifying sovereign-level laws. Clam Dragon's Eye, activate. In an instant, Knight Sorrow activated the Clam Dragon's Eye, which had also been upgraded after becoming a divine king. He observed the origin of Thousand Feather Flower Burial Sword. Seeing this, Knight Sorrow was shocked. Under the cover of the feathers and petals that filled the sky, Master Myriad Sword was actually thrusting his sword over. Break! If he hadn't activated the Clam Dragon's Eye in time, Knight Sorrow's body would probably have been pierced by this sword. However, now that he saw the shocking sword clearly, and in a situation where he wasn't at a disadvantage in terms of strength, he fiercely slapped out with his palm and knocked Master Wan Jian's sword aside. Heaven Covering Hand. After knocking Master Wan Jian's sword aside, Night Sorrow, who didn't have any divine artifacts, immediately used Heaven Covering Hand on him. He had learned this move a long time ago. It was a very crude move, and he hadn't used it in a long time. However, when he used it now, its power wasn't weak at all, and he immediately slapped it towards Master Wanjian's face. If this move hit, Master Wanjian's deity ocean would probably be destroyed. He was so scared that he immediately used his movement technique to move over. Although Master Wanjian's movement technique was amazing and he dodged in an instant, the wind from Night Sorrow's palm still shook off his hair bun. For a moment, his long black hair immediately scattered. He looked a little miserable. Good move. Night Sorrow's move isn't even a divine artifact, but it can return to its original state and cause damage to Master Wanjian. This is not simple. Seeing the battle in front of him, Ancestor Phoenix smiled in relief. This time, he didn't mock White Tiger Supreme, as he felt that there was no need to. How can my Master Wanjian suffer under the attack of a divine king ant? No, this is impossible. Go to hell. Rainbow-piercing sword. Chapter 2869. The sword of the sun-piercing rainbow was obviously different from the myriad feather burial. Comparatively, the myriad feather burial was obviously more flashy. However, the sword of the sun-piercing rainbow was definitely more like a heavy sword without a sharp edge. Good sword. Even Night Sorrow couldn't help but praise. His opponent's sword move was extremely imposing. The White Tiger Supreme and Ancestor Phoenix Supreme also nodded at Myriad Sword Sect's sword move. Myriad Sword Sect was currently the ruler of the God Realm with the most potential. Naturally, he was capable. Otherwise, even if the White Tiger Supreme was his uncle, he wouldn't be of much help. Let's see how you're going to break it. This move was already one of Myriad Sword Sect's most important killing moves. He roared after thrusting out his sword. The master of the 10,000 Sword Sect's long hair fluttered in the wind at this moment. He had completely entered a mysterious state of selflessness. He didn't hold back at all as he integrated himself into the sword move. Divine Origin Trapping Array. Night Sorrow could have dodged Myriad Sword Sect's move. However, he didn't. Instead, he used the Divine Origin Trapping Array. This Divine Origin Trapping Array was a variant of the Divine Origin Dragon Locking Array. Night Sorrow had further improved it. After the improvement, it was more convenient to use in battle. The energy consumption was also better. However, the trapping effect was very good. Boom! Myriad Sword Sect's sword, which was originally aimed at Night Sorrow, was blocked by the Divine Origin Trapping Array. Instantly, his sword struck the array's barrier. Although the Divine Origin Trapping Array was directly pierced by the sword, Myriad Sword Sect's sword had almost lost its power. 33 Heaven's Secret Battle Technique. At this moment, Night Sorrow took the opportunity to use the 33 Heavens Battle Secret Technique, greatly increasing his strength. Then, he used the Divine Origin Trapping Formation again, locking down the Master of 10,000 Swords position and directly striking his sword out of his hand. Now that you don't have a divine artifact with you, let me see how good your close combat skills are. After striking Myriad Sword Sect's sword out of his hand, Night Sorrow immediately began close combat with him. Do you think I'm afraid of a divine king like you? Even though the 10,000 Sword Sect had not gained the upper hand since the beginning of the battle, he still felt that Night Sorrow could not possibly be perfect in every aspect. He didn't even pick up his sword from the ground. Instead, he chose to engage in close combat with Night Sorrow. However, Night Sorrow's close combat abilities were very strong, and he displayed an extremely wild fighting style. It was almost like he was sacrificing 800 to injure the enemy. Very soon, he and the 1,000 Sword Sect were both heavily injured. However, since both sides were injured, their reactions were different. Night Sorrow had chosen this method of battle, and the Thousand Swords sect had been forced to fight this way. Originally, the Thousand Swords sect thought that he could easily defeat Knight Sorrow, but now he realized that the lower divine king in front of him was definitely at the level of a sovereign. Even though he was not necessarily stronger than himself, he was definitely not much weaker. Furthermore, there was an indescribable wildness on Yishang's body. When fighting him, the Myriad Sword sect felt like they were facing an ancient ferocious beast. That kind of ferocious battle intent was simply unlike that of a cultivator from the god realm. Now you know fear. Even though they were evenly matched, Knight Sorrow's heart was like a boulder. He continued to attack the Thousand Swords sect madly like a tidal wave. He knew that the Thousand Swords sect's true strength was not weak. In fact, they were even slightly stronger than him. Therefore, when he fought, he had to show his fierceness and make them fear him. Only then would he have a chance to win. Afraid? My Thousand Swords sect, afraid of a bumpkin from below. Laughable, truly laughable. The battle was not satisfying at all. The Thousand Swords sect was thoroughly enraged. He released his divine spirit energy and transformed it into a divine spirit sword. He slashed it directly at Knight Sorrow's head. This move did not hit the body, but the divine spirit. It was a terrifying attack. Amazing. Facing this move of the Thousand Swords sect, Knight Sorrow suddenly felt his body tighten. He felt a great pressure. If he was hit by this sword, his divine spirit would probably be directly torn apart. After thinking for a moment, Knight Sorrow roared, "Gentle Dragon Roar." Choosing to use a movement technique to escape at a time like this was obviously not advisable. At this moment, Knight Sorrow remembered the Gentle Dragon Roar that the Dragon Sparrow King had taught him. He suddenly roared. Boom! After being attacked by the Gentle Dragon Roar, the divine spirit sword formed by the Thousand Swords sect was instantly shattered. The Thousand Swords sect also spat out blood and abruptly sat on the ground. After being injured by this move, his divine spirit was greatly damaged. He felt as if his divine spirit was being torn apart. How is this possible? How is this possible? It's just a divine king. How is it that he's not weaker than me in all aspects? After being heavily injured by this move, the Thousand Swords sect sitting on the ground was clearly stunned. He did not dare to believe that a lower divine king would not lose to him in any aspect. No. Pull yourself together, I have to pull myself together. If this goes on, even if I'm not defeated, the Supreme Beings will announce the end of the battle. The Thousand Swords sect, who was still a little confused at first, immediately flew up from the ground and floated in the air. He roared crazily, "Die! Great Immortal Sword Technique." Then, his entire body turned into a sharp sword and blasted towards Knight Sorrow. Great Immortal Sword Technique. It's actually the long-lost Great Immortal Sword Technique. This is the Great Tao. The Thousand Swords sect is indeed not bad. The White Tiger Supreme, who was originally extremely disappointed, saw his nephew, the Thousand Swords sect, use the Great Immortal Sword Technique. He immediately calmed down and nodded in satisfaction. In fact, if the Thousand Swords sect was not his nephew, although he would consider the Thousand Swords sect, he would not protect him like today. There would also not be a battle between the two of them. The Great Immortal Sword Technique is indeed this move. It's not without reason that the Thousand Swords sect is favored by everyone. Knight Sorrow, I hope you can hold on. As long as you can withstand this move, the winner will be you. Seeing the Thousand Swords sect use the Great Immortal Sword Technique, the Horned Supreme immediately worried for Knight Sorrow. Speaking of which, he was the one who used divination to determine that Knight Sorrow was the child of destiny. Naturally, he hoped that Knight Sorrow could achieve something. Great Immortal Sword Technique. It's definitely not simple to be praised by the Supreme Beings. How should I break it? Facing the Thousand Swords sect who had turned into a sword, Knight Sorrow frowned and thought for a moment. Then, his eyes flashed. Imitating the Thousand Swords sect, he also turned into a sword and flew towards the Thousand Swords sect's sword form. Great Immortal Sword Technique. How is this possible? How do you know my ultimate technique? The 10,000 Swords sect was astonished to see Knight Sorrow transform into a giant sword as well. Idiot. His move is fake. Can't you tell? Chapter 2870. However, Master 10,000 Swords was clearly confused by the situation, and his mind was clearly shaken. Taking advantage of the fact that Master 10,000 Swords' mind was shaken and did not continue to lock onto Knight Sorrow successfully dodged this attack. Although he did not take advantage of Master 10,000 Swords' mind to launch a counterattack, the other party had used up a lot of energy to use such a trump card. When the Great Immortal Sword technique bombarded the barrier that Ancestor Phoenix had set up for the two of them, Paragon White Tiger was so angry that his nose was crooked. He had never thought that Master 10,000 Swords' mind would be shaken in the middle of a battle. This was fatal to cultivators, especially those at the level of rulers. You've lost. At this time, Knight Sorrow did not use up much energy, but after Master 10,000 Swords used the Great Immortal Sword technique, his body's divine essence was basically emptied. If he continued to fight, he might not even be able to use 60% of his strength. Yi Shang said confidently when he saw Yimo's condition. Damn it! How did I fall for your trick just now? The Great Immortal Sword technique was Master 10,000 Swords' greatest reliance, and at the same time, his greatest pride. Therefore, when Knight Sorrow imitated it just now, he was immediately stunned. Now that he thought about it, he was extremely regretful. However, he no longer had the ability to use it again. Your sword technique just now was very exquisite, and its power was also very terrifying. The first time you used it, it was a great threat to me, but if you use it again, it won't be much of a threat. You don't have to think about it anymore, use the Great Immortal Sword technique again. Floating in the void, Knight Sorrow looked at Master 10,000 Swords and said. The Great Immortal Sword technique was very mysterious, but after experiencing it once, he had seen through its rules and was no longer afraid of its power. Shameless boasting, if not for my carelessness, you would have already lost. You know that I can't use it again, so you're deliberately showing off, right? Master 10,000 Swords said unwillingly. If he had divine essence to support him to use the Great Immortal Sword technique again, he would not hesitate to use it on Knight Sorrow again. However, the divine essence in his body was not enough to support this operation at all. How about this? Let's make a bet. I'll let you consume some Yuan Qi recovery pills. Once you recover, you can use the Great Immortal Sword art again. If I can't handle it, then it'll be my loss. If I can take it, you admit defeat. What do you think? Generally speaking, in this kind of showdown, one could not consume any medicinal pills. However, at this moment, Knight Sorrow opened his mouth and gave the Myriad Sword sect a chance. Although he had just arrived at the Eternal Supreme Realm and did not have many tricks up his sleeves, it was still possible for him to withstand the Great Immortal Sword art. After all, he had already deduced the trajectory of the Great Immortal Sword art. Therefore, he was no longer afraid of this move. Hearing this, Master Wan Jian felt as if he had been insulted. He had the strength of an intermediate dominator, while his opponent was only a lower divine king. However, Knight Sorrow had given him the opportunity to consume the pill. This caused his cheeks to heat up. He wanted to say something, but he didn't. This is killing and destroying the heart. In the sword sect, swordsmen are born fearless. Whatever you want to do, just follow your heart. Remember, don't lose your confidence. Seeing that Master Wan Jian was in a dilemma, the White Tiger Sovereign immediately reminded him. Even the many supremes present did not notice this sentence. When Master Wan Jian heard it, he immediately felt as if he had been enlightened. In an instant, Boundless confidence rose. After a moment of silence, he looked at Night Sorrow and said coldly, "I agree to your bet." After saying that, he did not give Night Sorrow or the other Supremes a chance to refute. He directly swallowed 3 medicinal pills to recover his vitality and readjusted his strength to the peak. "Now that you have recovered your vitality, you can use the Great Immortal Sword Art," Night Sorrow said, and waited for Master Wan Jian to make his move. The Great Immortal Sword Art was more exquisite than any supreme art he had seen in the God realm. He had learned a lot from observing it once. If he experienced it again, he might be able to comprehend his own supreme art. Okay. However, swords have no eyes. If you die under this move, I will not be responsible. Master Wan Jian, who had readjusted his divine realm and aura to the peak, stared coldly at Night Sorrow and prepared his Great Immortal Sword Art. This time, Night Sorrow had given him enough time. He could fully display the Great Immortal Sword technique of the Myriad Sword Sect. It was even more powerful than the previous attack. Don't worry and use it. I believe that even if I lose, the Supremes won't just watch me be killed. After all, we are learning from each other, not fighting to the death. Night Sorrow said indifferently. He had an aura of disregard for his own life. That boldness of disregard for life and death satisfied not only Supreme Zhu Feng and the Horn Clan, but also some of the other Supremes present. At this point in the battle, they could already confirm that Night Sorrow was a rare genius who needed to be nurtured with all their might. However, there was a bet, and they could not interrupt the battle in front of them. Big Immortal Sword Art. Master Wan Jian, who had been preparing for a while, once again turned into a sharp sword and bombarded Night Sorrow's position. This time, he had completely locked onto Night Sorrow's aura, and had already mentally prepared himself to not be affected by any external factors. However, this time, something that surprised the Wan Jian house happened once again. At this moment, Night Sorrow didn't dodge the Great Celestial Sword Art. Instead, he imitated the Great Celestial Sword Art and attacked. In the void, the two figures had completely turned into similar sword shadows and bombarded the same point. In fact, Night Sorrow had already seen through the Great Immortal Sword Art. He could have dodged it if he wanted to. However, he had seen through the Great Immortal Sword Art in an instant, and suddenly wanted to test its power. After all, although he was a lower divine king, the strength of his body and his understanding of the laws were not much weaker than Master Wan Jian's. Even if his Great Immortal Sword Art was not as powerful as his opponent's, he could definitely put up a fight. You're courting death. Master Wan Jian was completely enraged when he saw Night Sorrow use the same move again. This time, he didn't hesitate at all and directly blasted his attack towards Yi Sorrow. Just in time. Let's test our true strength and see who's stronger. If it was purely for the sake of winning the bet, Night Sorrow could have retreated at this moment, but he did not do so. Because fighting with Master Wan Jian, who had great potential, was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He wanted to use this opportunity to improve his understanding of the battle between the sovereigns. This time, it doesn't seem fake. How is this possible? He has only seen it twice, and he can imitate its essence. What kind of talent is this? Ancestor Phoenix and the others who were watching from the side were shocked. Even Supreme White Tiger was shocked when he saw Night Sorrow's move clearly. Chapter 2871. Including the elusive City Lord, the White Tiger Sovereign had never seen anyone with Night Sorrow's perception. Aside from the White Tiger Sovereign, the other sovereigns present all looked at Yi Shang in a different light. In Night Sorrow's body, they saw a glimmer of hope that the God realm no longer had. However, some of the sovereigns lamented that Night Sorrow had appeared too late. There wasn't enough time for him to grow. Otherwise, as long as he became a sovereign, it would mean that the God realm had the power to fight against sovereigns. Even if they were to compete with the top 100 sovereigns for fortune, they wouldn't be at a disadvantage. As for the 10,000 Sword Sect, his understanding of the Great Immortal Sword technique had already reached a certain level. When he saw Knight Sorrow use the Great Immortal Sword technique again, the first thing he wanted to do was curse. However, after a moment of observation, his heart was in turmoil. Although Knight Sorrow's move was an imitation of the Great Immortal Sword technique, it was in essence a Great Immortal Sword technique, and it wasn't weak at all. How can this be? How can this be? As he attacked Knight Sorrow, the Myriad Swords Master's heart couldn't calm down. The Great Immortal Sword art was something he had spent an entire 800 years to gain a basic understanding of, and it had taken him roughly 20,000 years to completely grasp it. But now, Knight Sorrow had actually been able to imitate it with just 2 glances. This dealt a heavy blow to his confidence. You're unstable. You're bound to lose. Before he clashed with the Myriad Swords Master, Knight Sorrow saw that the Myriad Swords Master's mind was unstable again. He calmly transmitted this message. The duel before them was an internal exchange of pointers. Although Knight Sorrow was full of fighting spirit, there wasn't a trace of killing intent in his heart. No. I won't lose. In fact, I'll kill you. When he heard Knight Sorrow's words, the Myriad Swords Master immediately recovered. As he roared, dense killing intent surged from his body. How can you want to kill when you're just exchanging pointers? How can you achieve great things with such an unstable mind? Seeing the Myriad Swords Master's reaction, Ancestor Phoenix and Ancestor Horn both frowned. In their opinion, a cultivator's strength wasn't the only thing that was important, but also their temperament. The 10,000 Swords Sect had lost their minds in the battle, and now they were bursting with such a strong murderous aura. This was very wrong. The Sword Sect. Winning or losing is important, but in front of so many supreme martial artists, you exposed so many problems with your temperament. Uncle is very disappointed. The White Tiger Sovereign looked at the Myriad Swords Sect that was clashing with Knight Sorrow. He knew that even if the Myriad Swords Sect won today, it would be impossible to obtain the support of the majority of the Supremes. On the other hand, Knight Sorrow had already proven that he was a lower divine king who could fight against a ruler. Regardless of whether he won or lost, he would be nurtured with all his might. Even if he lost today and couldn't obtain the laws and essences of those invincible sovereigns, he would still be able to obtain other precious resources. Even if they had to force-feed Knight Sorrow, the 9 Heaven Supremes would think of a way to raise his cultivation to the ruler realm as soon as possible. Boom! Just as the White Tiger Sovereign was sighing in his heart, Knight Sorrow and the Myriad Swords Sect had completely clashed. Both of their attacks were at the ruler realm. When they collided, the void was completely shattered. However, the Supremes had set up defenses around them, so the City Lord Manor itself wasn't damaged. What's the result? The Supremes present all knew that the battle before them had completely ended. Whether it was the Myriad Swords Sect or Knight Sorrow, neither of them had the ability to continue fighting. Ancestor Phoenix Sovereign used her divine sense to investigate and found that the 2 of them were both standing in the void. Although they looked to be in a sorry state, neither of them had fallen. It was as if they were evenly matched. This is a little surprising. Could it be a draw? The other Supremes naturally also noticed the situation before them. Seeing that neither of them had fallen, the White Tiger Sovereign was a little more satisfied with his nephew. However, this time, he didn't speak. Although he was very satisfied with his nephew, reason told him that Knight Sorrow was the God Realm's territory's future. The current him, at the lower Divine King Realm, could already fight the Myriad Sword Sect, who was an intermediate ruler. This completely proved his strength and potential. No matter how picky the Supremes were, they couldn't find a reason not to support Knight Sorrow. At this thought, the White Tiger Sovereign said, "Knight Sorrow has won this battle." The Myriad Sword sect has the advantage in terms of cultivation realm. Those unrivaled rulers' laws and essences all belong to Night Sorrow. Since the White Tiger Sovereign had said so, the other Supremes obviously didn't have any objections. However, after the ruler spoke, Night Sorrow looked at the Myriad Sword sect and said, "Our battle ends in a draw. We'll split those resources equally. If the God realm wants to rise, it's not enough to rely on one person's efforts. Moreover, I have my own path to walk. No need. A loss is a loss." The Myriad Sword sect, who was standing in the void, was extremely surprised when he heard Night Sorrow's words. Because at this moment, he no longer had the ability to move. As long as Night Sorrow continued to attack, the one who lost would be him. Before the battle, we valued victory and defeat. But now, it doesn't matter. What's important is how we unite and help the God realm overcome this crisis together. Night Sorrow knew that the Myriad Sword sect had lost to him, but he had already proved his and Supreme's foresight, so he didn't care about the so-called victory or defeat. Good. That's bold. The White Tiger Sovereign immediately cheered when he heard Night Sorrow's words. At the same time, if the Myriad Sword sect could obtain the resources of an unrivaled ruler, he would definitely be able to advance to an upper ruler. That would also be a considerable improvement. Moreover, if he absorbed and comprehended the unrivaled ruler's laws, his strength would also improve. As an uncle, he still thought of the Myriad Sword sect. However, the Myriad Sword sect suddenly said, "A loss is a loss. I'm inferior to you. The unrivaled ruler's laws and essences all belong to you." He didn't want to accept this gift at all. In the Myriad Sword sect's eyes, this was Night Sorrow's charity. He didn't need it at all. When the Supremes saw that the Myriad Sword sect wasn't prepared to accept the unrivaled ruler's laws and essences, they were all astonished. But no one tried to persuade him otherwise. In their eyes, giving all the resources to Night Sorrow so that he could quickly increase his strength was the best outcome for the God realm. At this time, Night Sorrow spoke up to persuade him, "If nothing unexpected happens, we'll both participate in a certain battle 100 years from now. If you increase your strength, it'll help me and the God realm. So, you have no reason or right to refuse." Chapter 2872. Since that's Night Sorrow's wish, then let's end this happily for everyone. This battle ends in a draw. The Myriad Sword sect and Night Sorrow will each receive half of the Sovereign's laws and essence, as well as half of the resources. Seeing that Night Sorrow was considering the problem from the perspective of the God realm, Zhu Feng smiled. Nodding in satisfaction, he said, "Myriad Sword sect, these resources are one of the foundations of the God realm. I hope you can cherish them well and put all your efforts into increasing your strength and contributing to the God realm. As for your battle with Night Sorrow, it's just a display of your potential. Don't worry about it. Yes. The Sword sect will remember the Sovereign's teachings." Originally, Myriad Sword sect was extremely unwilling, thinking that Night Sorrow was fishing for fame. But soon, with the White Tiger Sovereign's reminder, he understood that Night Sorrow was truly standing from the perspective of the God realm. That was a kind of boldness, and he was instantly jolted awake. He had come out of his childhood to consider the problems from the perspective of his country. The two of you shake hands and make peace. This battle is over, and it's over. Seeing that Myriad Sword sect didn't choose to rebel, the White Tiger Sovereign nodded in satisfaction. Then, he called Night Sorrow and Myriad Sword sect in front of him and had them shake hands and make peace. Good. Night Sorrow will remember this. Night Sorrow said calmly as he shook hands with Myriad Sword sect. At this moment, his state of mind had changed a little. He realized that the sovereigns of the God realm were clearly different from some of the sovereigns of the God realm. Although the White Tiger Sovereign leaned towards Myriad Sword sect, after he revealed his talent, he didn't show any jealousy or dissatisfaction. Instead, he admired him from the bottom of his heart. It was obvious that these people were looking at things from the perspective of the entire God realm. No discord, no concord. From now on, Brother Yi, please guide me. At this time, Myriad Sword Sect had gradually walked out of the shadow of defeat. He didn't completely wallow in his failure and couldn't extricate himself. After all, the God realm was no longer like this. As the sovereigns who grew up in the God realm, they didn't have that kind of invincible spirit in their hearts that couldn't lose. Otherwise, Myriad Sword Sect wouldn't have lost his mind time and time again when fighting with Night Sorrow. Good. From now on, we'll be friends. We can interact more and exchange experiences or exchange pointers. Night Sorrow nodded politely. Good. The God Realm's territory needs this kind of harmony. Supreme Ancestral Dragon said when he saw Night Sorrow shaking hands with the Myriad Sword Sect, the City Lord and the 2 Vice City Lords aren't here right now. Let's take out the resources for the 2 young geniuses. Black Tortoise Sovereign, what do you think? The White Tiger Supremacy and the Ancestral Phoenix Supremacy supported Night Sorrow and the Myriad Sword Sect respectively. They would definitely agree to immediately distribute the resources to the 2 of them. Therefore, the Ancestral Dragon Supremacy asked for the Black Tortoise Supremacy's opinion. The 4 of them had the highest status in the God Realm City. The other one with a slightly higher status was the Horn Clan's sovereign. He was proficient in divination and could often use his special ability to help the God Realm's territory avert danger. He was a very special existence. Even the matter of Night Sorrow becoming the Destiny's child was divined by him. But normally, the Horn Clan's sovereign didn't like to speak. Today, he said some words because he was a little excited about Night Sorrow's arrival. There's still 100 years until the War of Providence. This time, if the God Realm can't enter the top 1,000, the Providence won't be able to hold on. You 2 young geniuses must quickly increase your strength. There's no problem with giving you the resources, but you must understand one thing. That is, you're the hope of the entire God Realm. Sovereign Black Tortoise didn't answer Ancestral Sovereign Ancestor Dragon directly. Instead, he looked at Night Sorrow and Myriad Sword Sect and said, "But before I give you the resources, I have a question to ask. How many years have the 2 of you cultivated separately?" Sword Sect. It's been 2 eras. After Sovereign Black Tortoise asked, Myriad Sword Sect immediately replied. Then, he looked at Night Sorrow like everyone else. Myriad Sword Sect cultivated for 2 eras to reach their current level. Their cultivation speed was even faster than some of the Supremes present. Logically speaking, there should be people talking. But at this moment, everyone's attention was on Night Sorrow. Obviously, in their hearts, Night Sorrow was the most important existence. Seeing everyone's attention on him, Night Sorrow thought for a moment and said, "Less than an era." In reality, he had cultivated for less than 10,000 years in the real world. This was considered to be leaving some face for Myriad Sword Sect. How long exactly? Cultivating to the Divine King realm with one opportunity isn't slow, but it's not that amazing. There aren't many such geniuses in the God realm, but there are countless of them in other realms. When Sovereign Black Tortoise heard Night Sorrow's words, he immediately asked for the exact time. He felt that the other party was being a little careless. Not counting the cultivation in the spatial artifact, it should be around 3,000 to 4,000 years. Night Sorrow didn't pay much attention. Night Sorrow told the truth. He only gave a rough estimate based on his impression and didn't calculate it accurately. What? Cultivating for 3,000 to 4,000 years in the lower realm, and you've reached your current level. Amazing, really amazing. In time, even the Eternal Supreme Realm will spread your name. The Black Tortoise Supremacy, who had originally had a grave expression on his face, smiled when he heard Yi Xiang's answer. Then, he said, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and take out those resources and give them to them. According to Knight Sorrow's cultivation time, 100 years isn't a short time for him. He can definitely make good use of it. In the battle for Providence 100 years later, we still need him to take the lead. We must spare no effort to provide resources. That's right. When Sovereign Ancestral Dragon heard Knight Sorrow's cultivation time, he was also pleasantly surprised. He knew that as long as the God Realm passed through the current crisis of Providence, it wouldn't be too difficult to continue for thousands or tens of thousands of years. As long as Knight Sorrow was given a few tens of thousands of years, he might be able to become a supreme. With his talent, he might even surpass the City Lord of the God Realm. Here are the resources that both of you deserve. Keep them well. Sovereign Ancestral Dragon, Sovereign Black Tortoise, Sovereign Ancestral Phoenix, and Sovereign White Tiger took out the resources and divided them into 2 equal portions, giving one each to Knight Sorrow and Myriad Sword Sect. When they handed the items to Knight Sorrow, Sovereign White Tiger patted Knight Sorrow's shoulder and said, "Later, I will instruct my subordinates to prepare a house for you in the City Lord's mansion. You can rule the City Lord's mansion on normal days. If you have any questions about cultivation, you can ask us at any time. Every year, we will gather in the City Lord's mansion." Thank you, Sovereign White Tiger. Chapter 2873. Knight Sorrow, if you want to understand the situation of the Eternal Supremes, you don't need to read those books. The White Tiger's sovereign smiled when he heard Yi Shang, and then he looked at the Myriad Sword Sect and said, "Sword Sect, show Yi Shang around and familiarize him with the cities of the God world. Moreover, explain the specific situation of the Eternal Supreme Dimension to him." "Yes, Lord Supreme." In front of everyone, Myriad Sword Sect did not address the White Tiger's sovereign as uncle. He then looked at Knight Sorrow and said, "Brother Yi, if you don't mind, you can walk around the city with me." "Brother Wan, what are you saying? Let's go." Knight Sorrow bid farewell to the Supremes, then followed the 10,000 Sword Sect out of the City Lord's mansion. As soon as they walked out of the mansion, Knight Sorrow asked, "Brother Wan, other than the Celestial Realm, what else is there in the Celestial Realm? Although the situation is grim, there shouldn't be only one city left, right?" That's not the case." Myriad Sword Sect shook his head. "The Celestial Realm has its own territory, just like the other territories. Other than the Celestial Realm, there are tens of millions of miles of jurisdiction. The place we are in is a safe zone, while most of the other areas are filled with danger. Outside the safe zone, there are many sovereigns and supremes fighting. The sovereigns and supremes who are fighting are rotated. Aren't there people from other territories attacking the Celestial Realm?" Knight Sorrow asked as they walked on the empty streets of the Celestial Realm. He had heard about the Celestial Realm situation from the Ancestral Phoenix, but he did not know much about it. "There are people from other realms attacking. They are a great threat, but as long as the destiny of the Celestial Realm is not destroyed, it will be protected by the Eternal Supremes. Although they will attack the safe zone and suffer divine punishment, they won't really destroy the Celestial Realm." At this point, the 10,000 Sword Sect sighed and continued, "But if that sliver of fortune in our territory is destroyed, the surrounding territories will definitely destroy our territory and invade the God Realm behind us. As for the ones attacking the God Realm safe zone, it's not just the people from other territories, but also the natives of the Eternal Supreme Realm. They don't have much intelligence, but they are extremely powerful. Without the strength of a sovereign, it's impossible to deal with them. So that's how it is. It seems like we really need to do our best to plunder the Celestial Realm's providence in 100 years." Knight Sorrow had originally thought that luck was a mysterious thing, but now that it involved the protection of the Eternal Supreme World, he immediately realized the seriousness of the matter and took it seriously. Knight Sorrow then asked curiously, "Brother Wan, where did you grow up?" Was it also the God realm? But I don't think I've heard anything about you in the God realm. The supreme beings were basically all great figures from 3,000 reincarnations ago. Those were all things that happened in the distant past, so it was normal that they hadn't heard of them. However, the 10,000 Swords sect had personally said that he had risen to power in the last 2 eras, which made Knight Sorrow very curious. I was born in the deity realm, but I've been cultivating in the eternal supreme realm. The 10,000 Swords sect smiled and explained, at that time, there were a total of 300 genius seedlings who were brought from the God realm to the eternal supreme realm by the ancestor Phoenix Supreme. After arriving at the eternal supreme realm, we have been cultivating in the God realm until we reached the sovereign level. Only then could we come out. I'm the 11th to reach the sovereign level. Now, there are a total of 19 people who have reached the sovereign level. However, in the battle outside the safe zone, 12 of us have fallen. Only 7 of us are left. So that's how it is. It seems that the supreme beings have really put in a lot of effort for the God realm's territory. You genius seedlings really don't have it easy. Cultivating in seclusion all the time, if one's mind is weak, I'm afraid he won't be able to persevere. Knight Sorrow sighed. If he had been forced to cultivate in a secluded area all the time, he would probably have gone crazy from the stifling. It's a little depressing, yes. But our achievements are much greater than staying in the God realm. If we hadn't come to the eternal supreme realm, I'm afraid none of us would have reached the sovereign level in such a short time. After all, you know how difficult it is to become a sovereign in the God realm. The 10,000 Swords sect said indifferently. Obviously, he was very happy that he had been chosen. Just as he said, if the White Tiger Sovereign hadn't brought him to the eternal supreme realm, with his potential, he would have achieved something in the God realm, but at most he would be a divine king. At this point, the 10,000 Swords sect said with sincere admiration, Brother Ye's potential is still the highest. It only took you a few thousand years to become a divine king in the God realm. If you had been brought to the eternal supreme realm, you would have become a sovereign long ago. I'm guessing that when the supreme beings were choosing, I was still in the realms below the God realm. My path of growth has always been accompanied by resistance and slaughter. Knight Sorrow smiled as he told his story. After listening to Knight Sorrow's story from beginning to end, the 10,000 Swords sect revealed an expression of longing. He said enviously, Brother Ye's path of cultivation is brilliant and varied. In comparison, people like us still lack some experience. When I fought with you, I realized that I wasn't decisive enough in a moment of life and death. This is one of my weaknesses. After hearing about Brother Juan's experience, I can understand why you weren't decisive enough in battle. You still lack the baptism of life and death battles. It was only now that Knight Sorrow understood that the 10,000 Swords sect and the others were sovereigns who had been force-fed. Their actual combat experience was pitifully low. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made such a low-level mistake in battle. After thinking for a moment, Knight Sorrow continued, if it's possible, can we go to the border of the safe zone to train? Of course we can. Most of the resources we normally obtain are from the savage sovereigns outside the safe zone, the 10,000 Swords sect said. Master 10,000 Swords sighed. But we only have 100 years before we have to participate in the War of Providence. Using 100 years to absorb the precepts of those invincible sovereigns would be very difficult. That's true. After we familiarize ourselves with the God realm cities, we should immediately start cultivating. If possible, even if we can't absorb all of it, we should set aside 30 years for battle. What do you think? Knight Sorrow looked at the 10,000 Swords sect and made an agreement. Without absorbing the natural laws and essence of the invincible sovereigns, it was impossible to directly fight. All right. There's no time to lose. Let's immediately return to our base and cultivate. In the eternal supreme world, the natural laws of time are extremely stable. Even the city lord's mansion only has a spatial paradise that accelerates time by 3 times. Thus, 100 years here can at most be 300 years. Let's make good use of this opportunity and increase our strength as much as possible. After making an agreement with Knight Sorrow, the 10,000 Swords sect explained a few other things about the Eternal Supreme World to him before sending him back to the City Lord's mansion. Then, they returned to the tavern where the others were. Chapter 2874. When the people in the restaurant heard the Myriad Swords sect mention Knight Sorrow, their faces were filled with disbelief. After all, they had clearly seen Knight Sorrow's cultivation. It was only at the level of the Divine King. That was something that couldn't be faked. Perhaps he really can help us get out of this predicament. The Myriad Swords sect took a sip of cold wine and sighed. When he thought of everything that had happened to Knight Sorrow, he felt somewhat defeated. He was already an intermediate dominator, but he had been defeated by Knight Sorrow, a lesser Divine King. There was no way he would be able to contend against him in the future. When the other sovereigns heard the Myriad Swords sect's words, they also realized that Knight Sorrow was different from the rest. They began to discuss matters outside the safe zone, as well as the future prospects of the heavenly realm. As for Knight Sorrow, after returning to the City Lord's manor, he sought out the Ancestor Phoenix, as well as Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei. Knight Sorrow immediately gave them a portion of the unrivaled Dominator's laws and essence he had obtained. However, Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei knew what this meant, so they didn't accept Knight Sorrow's gift. Knight Sorrow, if you're thinking about them, hurry up and increase your strength. Go outside the safe zone and hunt down the Dominator-level desolate beasts. Bring back the laws and essence they contain. That's the most common way to increase one's strength in the Eternal Supreme Realm. Seeing that Knight Sorrow was about to give up the unrivaled Dominator's laws and essence, the Ancestor Phoenix's expression became somewhat unnatural. He reminded Knight Sorrow of this. Knight Sorrow knew what the Ancestor Phoenix meant. He nodded and said, Knight Sorrow will cultivate as quickly as possible and try to increase my strength a bit more. Then, I'll head outside the safe zone to hunt down desolate beasts. In his conversation with the Myriad Swords sect, Knight Sorrow had already learned that desolate beasts were native to the Eternal Supreme Realm. Like the natives, they were extremely powerful and bloodthirsty. However, most of them lived alone, so they were easier to deal with than the primitive tribes. Knight Sorrow. I know that you are responsible and you want to obtain cultivation resources for your family and friends who don't have the means to obtain resources. However, you must remember that the Eternal Supreme Realm's danger is incomparable to the Heavenly Realm. The living beings here were mostly at the Sovereign Realm or the Supreme Realm. There were even some immature young beasts that were at the Divine King Realm. Therefore, it's extremely dangerous to go hunting. Ancestor Phoenix described the dangers of eternal supremacy to Knight Sorrow, then said, as the saying goes, the son of 1,000 gold coins can't just sit and wait. Right now, you are the hope of the entire God realm. You must take care of yourself. The Eternal Supreme World's natural laws, space, and time were all extremely stable. At the same time, it contained a large number of natural treasures. However, it did not contain much divine essence. If one wanted to increase their strength quickly, they could first obtain resources from desolate beasts. Secondly, they could search for natural treasures. Ancestor Phoenix knew that Yi Shang would not watch his family's strength stagnate. Therefore, he would definitely leave the safe zone and hunt in the dangerous areas of the celestial realm. Lord Supreme Martial Artist, Yi Shang will remember your words. But there are things that men can and cannot do. Yi Shang must first support his own small family before he can support a large family like the God realm. Hearing Knight Sorrow's words, although Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei did not want him to take the risk, they were still very touched. The most important thing for a man was to be able to shoulder the responsibility on his shoulders. Knight Sorrow was obviously such a person. He would not let anyone around him down. Knight Sorrow did not pay attention to the expressions of the two women. He cupped his fists towards the Ancestor Phoenix and asked, "Lord Supreme, I heard from Brother One that there is a 3 times acceleration space in the City Lord's mansion. Knight Sorrow wants to cultivate in it. I wonder if that's possible." 3 times acceleration space is one of the most precious treasures of the City Lord's mansion. If ordinary people want to use it, they have to pay eternal crystals. But you are everyone's hope, so you don't have to pay. Wait here, I will help you apply for the qualifications to enter. After Supreme Phoenix said this, he turned around and left to discuss Knight Sorrow's use of the accelerated space with the other Supremes. At this time, Jing Yun said, "Husband, in fact, you don't need to think so much about us. Lord Supreme just told us that if we pass the assessment, we can join the Heavenly Realm's genius base to cultivate. As long as we join, we can obtain unlimited resources until we reach the Sovereign Realm." That's right, Knight Sorrow. You don't need to spend too much energy on us. After all, you have enough responsibilities. Wu Lingfei also said, "Although the two of us are not as talented as you, it shouldn't be a problem for us to enter the genius base. You don't need to worry too much. But I've heard that unless one cultivates to the Sovereign Realm, it's impossible to leave that place. I can't bear to let you lose your freedom." When the two said this, Knight Sorrow understood that they were preparing to enter the genius base that nurtured the Myriad Sword sect. Recalling some of the words of the Myriad Sword sect, Knight Sorrow felt that although he could improve his strength there were too many restrictions. His family didn't need to be trapped there. If they wanted resources, he could go and obtain them. Seeing that Knight Sorrow didn't quite agree, Jing Yun was a little unhappy. "Husband, Aunt Fei, and I have our own ideas. We don't want to be a burden to you. Can you understand this? You always carry all the responsibilities on your shoulders. It's too tiring." "Yes. Knight Sorrow, we don't want you to work too hard. Moreover, you're busy increasing your strength. Even if you obtain resources, it's best if you use them yourself. Giving them to us is a waste of resources. If we use the resources you snatch to increase our strength, our mentality will be unstable." Wu Lingfei also explained. She and Jing Yun didn't want to take up precious time. "All right. I won't force you on this matter. If you want to, you can try it with Fire Phoenix King and the others." Yi Shang thought for a moment, and indeed understood the two women's mentality. If it were him, he would probably make the same choice. After Supreme Ancestor Phoenix returned, Knight Sorrow told him about Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei's choice. Hearing this, Supreme Ancestor Phoenix immediately had a whole new level of respect for Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei. He nodded approvingly and said, "Knight Sorrow, go and cultivate well. I will take good care of them and Fire Phoenix King and the others. Let them enter the genius base successfully." "Good. Supreme Ancestor Phoenix, Knight Sorrow will quickly increase my strength and strive to reach the Sovereign Realm as soon as possible." After settling the matter of Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei, Knight Sorrow finally had the mood to enter the City Lord's residence's cultivation space. He cultivated without any distracting thoughts. Chapter 2875. The laws and essence of these invincible sovereigns were thousands of times stronger than sovereign moxies. This was the first time he'd ever seen such pure energy. It was far superior to God veins. It was a supreme cultivation treasure. Although he wasn't sure what level he'd reach if he absorbed all of these resources, Knight Sorrow was confident that he'd be able to reach the intermediate Divine King level at the very least. Furthermore, this breakthrough was similar to breaking through to the Sovereign Realm. It would be a huge improvement. The wills contained within these laws and essences have already been removed by the autarchs. I can just absorb them directly. It seems like I won't need 70 years in the real world. After settling his emotions, Knight Sorrow found a quiet room and set up a formation. Then, he began to peacefully absorb the laws and essences of these invincible sovereigns. He sat there for 120 years. On the 120th year, Knight Sorrow suddenly opened his eyes. He'd successfully broken through to the intermediate Divine King level and was about to face his tribulation. After overcoming the tribulation, Knight Sorrow once more began to absorb the resources in front of him. At this point, only a third of the laws and essences of the invincible races remained. Knight Sorrow used 30 years to absorb them all. This time, however, he didn't experience any increase in cultivation level. Roughly 50 years had passed in the outside world. As soon as Knight Sorrow emerged from seclusion, he immediately contacted Ancestor Phoenix and asked about Jing Yun, Wu Lingfei, and the others. He learned that they'd already entered the genius base and couldn't be seen for the time being. Knight Sorrow went straight to the Myriad Sword Sect. When he arrived, he found that the Myriad Sword Sect was still in seclusion. 3 sovereigns were standing guard for him. When they saw Knight Sorrow, the 3 sovereigns' eyes lit up. "Are you the child of destiny, Knight Sorrow?" "This one is indeed Knight Sorrow, but I don't deserve the title of child of destiny." Knight Sorrow could sense that they didn't have any ill intentions. He immediately responded, then asked, "How should I address you? Are you all Brother Wan's friends?" We all cultivated together in the genius base. "My name is Xuechang Tian, this is Yuan Feng Shui, he is Murong Zhenlu." The sovereign with a long sword on his back introduced the only female cultivator present and the other sovereign with a folding fan to Knight Sorrow with a smile on his face. "Nice to meet you, nice to meet you." After Xuechang Tian introduced him, Murong Zizhen, who was holding a folding fan, immediately bowed to Yishang. He was dressed in a white robe and didn't look like a cultivator. Instead, he looked more like a graceful scholar. The female cultivator, Yuan Fengshui, was dressed in a red robe. She didn't have any weapons in her hands. She also greeted Knight Sorrow with a smile. The 3 of them were in awe of the Myriad Sword Sect. After hearing about Knight Sorrow from him, he immediately felt admiration for him. He completely retracted his previous thoughts of looking down on the Divine King. "Everyone, how long will it take for Brother Wan to come out of seclusion?" Knight Sorrow exchanged pleasantries with the 3, then asked about the Myriad Sword Sect situation. His strength had risen to the level of the mid-level Divine King. He wanted to immediately head out of the safe zone and test his strength. He also wanted to find some suitable materials to forge a divine weapon similar to the Samsara halberd. After all, he'd always used the spear as his weapon. It was a good weapon. At the same time, he wanted to forge a suitable bow. When he used the Tianyun bow, Knight Sorrow discovered that the combination of a bow and a spear, 1 long-range and 1 close-range divine weapons, was quite suitable. Brother Wan shouldn't be able to absorb all the resources in a short period of time. He told us to call him out in 60 years. 50 years have already passed, so there are still 10 years left. Xuechang Tian explained to Knight Sorrow. "The 3 of you have been guarding this place for 50 years. Knight Sorrow was surprised to hear Xuechang Tian's words. He felt that there shouldn't be any danger in the God realm. There shouldn't be a need for 3 people to guard this place. Brother Yi, you've been cultivating in the City Lord's manor, so you don't know the dangers outside. As the saying goes, all the hustle and bustle of the world is for profit. The news of Brother Wan obtaining the law of invincible sovereign has already spread through the city. It's inevitable that he'll be targeted by some people with bad intentions. Although the territories of the divine realm appear to be harmonious, there are still some dark sides in the dark." Xuechang Tian patiently explained to Knight Sorrow. He also told Knight Sorrow that although some cultivators in the God realm didn't dare to act against their own people on the surface, there were many who would do such things behind the scenes. Some people would immediately turn hostile for resources. So there are people like this. It seems that the most unpredictable thing is the human heart. When Knight Sorrow heard this, he immediately began to worry about Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei's situation. He looked at Yuan Fengxue. Senior Sister Yuan, is it convenient for female cultivators to cultivate in the genius base? You have a female friend who has entered the genius base to cultivate. Yuan Fengxue, who had been somewhat absent-minded, immediately locked her gaze on Knight Sorrow's face. Yes. My wife, another family member, and 3 other friends have entered the genius base. Knight Sorrow spoke truthfully. With the help of Ancestor Phoenix, Jing Yun, Wu Lingfei, Fire Phoenix Monarch, and Dragon Sparrow Monarch had all entered the genius base to cultivate. What kind of strength do they have? Can they sweep through the ranks of the Divine King? Yuan Fengxue didn't mention the rules of the genius base. Instead, she asked about Jing Yun and the others' strength. It's impossible for them to sweep through the ranks of the Divine King. However, although 2 of my family members are lower Divine Kings, their talents are quite good. They're close to Ancestor Phoenix's. As for the other 3 friends, they have the strength of High God Kings. Yisheng didn't hide anything when he talked about the strength of Jing Yun and the others. In the genius base, it's not necessarily a good thing for a woman to have good talent. Yuan Fengxue sighed and said, because those who enter the genius base can't leave until they reach the ruler level. Some people have stayed there for too long and can't see any hope of reaching the ruler level. Over time, their mentality will become unbalanced. You're saying that my 2 family members might be targeted by some people? Although Yuan Fengxue's words were very reserved, Knight Sorrow could understand the meaning behind them and asked excitedly. Yes. Some people can't break through to the ruler level, so they'll think of evil ways, such as dual cultivating with talented women. Yuan Fengxue frowned. Back in the genius base, she had been taken care of by the Myriad Sword sect. That was why she hadn't been taken over by evil cultivators. Won't the Supremes ask about these things? Knight Sorrow, who was worried about Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei, asked unhappily. The genius base has its own rules. After entering, you have to rely on yourself. The Supremes can't act as they please. Yuan Fengxue explained on behalf of the Supremes. In truth, the number of geniuses in the God realm is already extremely low. If there wasn't a catfish effect, many people in the genius base would slack off. What she said made sense, but Knight Sorrow didn't feel good when he heard it. He cupped his fists at the 3 and said, you guys continue to protect Brother Wan. I'll go take a look at the genius base and return soon. Chapter 2876. All right. Brother Yi, if you need anything, just let us know. After all, we came from the genius base, so we can more or less help. Xue Changtian looked at Knight Sorrow and said solemnly. He knew that it wasn't easy for women to survive in the genius base. Murong Zhenlu also made the same promise. As for Yuan Fengxue, he handed over a sound transmission stone and said, Brother Yi, if it's urgent, you can crush the sound transmission stone. I'll wake Brother Wan up and we'll go together. Thank you, everyone. Knight Sorrow will remember this favor. Knight Sorrow cupped his fists and remembered their favor. At the same time, he went to the City Lord's mansion to look for Supreme Ancestor Phoenix, who hadn't left yet. At this time, the other Supremes had basically gone to the safe zone to fight. Supreme Ancestor Phoenix had to deal with some matters in the city, so he stayed behind. Knight Sorrow came to the genius base with Supreme Ancestor Phoenix. He realized that the environment here wasn't bad. It was a huge mountain range with verdant hills and clear waters. It didn't look much different from an ordinary sect. However, the entire mountain range was covered by a huge formation, so it wasn't easy for the people inside to come out. Some of the geniuses inside would feel a huge psychological pressure. Actually, the children inside are all pitiful people. However, if you want to wear a crown, you have to bear its weight. If you want to be above others, how can you do it without paying a price? Supreme Ancestor Phoenix explained to Knight Sorrow when he brought him into the genius base. Then, he continued, actually, the price they paid isn't much at all. The resources they used were exchanged with the lives of other sovereigns and supremes. In order to nurture them, our divine realm territory has already sacrificed several sovereigns. It's all to help them obtain enough sovereigns' laws and essence. Supreme Ancestor, are you saying that the resources these geniuses need are obtained from the sovereigns of the divine realm territory in the hunting zone? Why don't we send out supremes to obtain them? Knight Sorrow asked doubtfully. The eternal supreme world has its own laws. If supremes go to kill sovereigns, they'll exhaust their luck. If that wasn't the case, our divine realm territory's luck wouldn't be so severely depleted. Supremacy Ancestral Phoenix sighed. In the past, they had dispatched supreme beings to the hunting zone to kill wild beasts. Now, it seemed like they were killing the goose that laid the golden eggs. Lord Supreme, don't worry. Knight Sorrow will go back to hunt desolate beasts in the near future and strive for a great harvest. When the time comes, I'll gift it all to the genius base for free. Knight Sorrow had already advanced to become a mid-level divine king. He was basically capable of contending against ordinary high-level sovereigns. Coupled with the myriad sword sect and the others, they should be able to reap a decent harvest. Haha. You don't have to do it for free. Although the supremes of the deity realm are unable to kill the desolate beast personally, they have already received the corresponding rewards. As long as you can kill a desolate beast, you can come to the genius base's treasury to exchange for the corresponding resources. Sovereigns kill desolate beasts with their lives on the line. If there isn't some sort of reward, it wouldn't make sense. Supreme Phoenix Ancestor began to explain the rewards of the divine world's territories. Typically, as long as dominators killed desolate beasts, they would be able to exchange for the corresponding resources. The resources they could exchange for included manuals, materials, insights, pills, etc. It was enough to support a cultivator to reach the utmost exalt level. These resources belonged to the Supremes, especially the City Lord and the 2 Vice City Lords. Currently, the 2 Vice City Lords were in the process of searching for the City Lord and had been snatching resources from all sorts of dangerous places. Their goal was to help the geniuses of the deity realm and accumulate some rewards. All right. Knight Sorrow will remember Lord Supreme's words. After hearing Supreme Phoenix Ancestor's words, Knight Sorrow had a certain idea of how to increase his strength in the future. In the future, when he was outside the safe zone and confirmed whether he could obtain the power of virtue, he could also use the resources he obtained to exchange for the materials and cultivation resources he needed. This was something that the Myriad Sword sect and the others hadn't mentioned. We're here. Just as Knight Sorrow was thinking about his future path, Supreme Phoenix Ancestor suddenly reminded him that they had arrived at the core of the Genius Base. The Genius Base was currently very lively. Because there were people fighting on the challenge stage, there were many spectators. These Divine King sovereigns were too engrossed in watching and didn't even notice Supreme Phoenix Ancestor's arrival. What? It's Aunt Faye. When Knight Sorrow saw clearly who was participating in the battle, his heart jumped to his throat. If it were him, he wouldn't be nervous at all no matter what kind of opponent he faced. But it was completely different when it was Wu Lingfei. Wu Lingfei still had the strength of a lower divine king, but her realm had stabilized a lot. Her opponent was an upper divine king with a cold and arrogant expression. In terms of realm, her opponent clearly had the advantage, but Wu Lingfei's bloodline talent was stronger, and she didn't fall into a disadvantage in the battle. Knight Sorrow saw the situation in front of him and let out a sigh of relief. He began to search for Jing Yun in the crowd. Soon, he saw Jing Yun at the edge of the stage with a worried expression. At that moment, Jing Yun was clearly injured. She didn't seem to be in a good condition. Night Sorrow hurried to her side and asked, "Jing Yun, what's going on? Why are you also injured when Aunt Fei is fighting on the stage?" "Husband. You're here." Seeing Night Sorrow suddenly arrive, a look of pleasant surprise appeared on Jing Yun's face. Night Sorrow held Jing Yun's hand and asked again, "What's going on?" "Husband, don't worry. For decades, Aunt Fei and I have often challenged each other." Seeing Night Sorrow's worry, Jing Yun immediately recounted her experiences in the past few decades. When the two of them first arrived, they were immediately coveted by some cultivators because of their stunning beauty and relatively low realm. But after a few battles, they gradually made a name for themselves. And with the help of Fire Phoenix King, Dragon Sparrow King, and others, they gradually formed a relatively strong group and quickly gained a foothold in the genius base. Although the stakes of the current battle weren't small, what was bet was resources. There was no harm to the two women themselves. "So that's how it is. Then your husband is relieved." Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei gained a foothold in the genius base where competition was fierce. Night Sorrow suddenly felt that he had suppressed their radiance. Usually, in front of him, whether it was Jing Yun or Wu Lingfei, their radiance was overshadowed. Now that they had their own circumstances, the two of them immediately began to write their own stories. "Husband, don't worry. Aunt Fei and I will take good care of ourselves." Night Sorrow's arrival made Jing Yun extremely happy. She unconsciously hugged his arm. And at this time, the battle between Wu Lingfei and her opponent had already reached its climax. Chapter 2877. Clearly, the two were preparing for a decisive battle. Wu Lingfei, who had transformed into an ice phoenix, released a cold divine domain that made everyone present feel a strong chill. Even some of the spectating Divine King couldn't recognize her and started trembling. Right now, she wasn't just an ice phoenix, she had the aura of an ice empress. Icebound world. Wu Lingfei, who had turned into an ice phoenix, raised her head and roared, using a bloodline technique that she had recently comprehended. In an instant, the world on the stage was completely frozen. "You're clearly of the phoenix race, but the ice element is even more terrifying than the fire element. You're really hard to deal with. I've lost." On the stage, Wu Lingfei's opponent, Chen Haiming, was an upper-level divine king and ranked in the top 30 of Genius Base. However, in the face of Wu Lingfei's icebound world, although he tried his best to resist, he was still frozen. After being frozen, he unwillingly transmitted his voice to Wu Lingfei, indicating that he admitted defeat. He was afraid that Wu Lingfei would continue attacking and destroy his divine weapon. "You've lost. Then can you hand over the thing you promised me?" After winning, Wu Lingfei returned to her human form and the newly refined ice illusion armor immediately wrapped around her, giving her the aura of an ice empress. "This is a reincarnation-type divine metal. Take it." Chen Haiming unwillingly took out a piece of metal that emitted a cold light from his grotto heaven and said, "Do you dare to fight with Nanxian Moli? If you win, I'll give you 10 times more of this divine metal. If you lose, dual cultivate with Nanxian Moli." Nanxian Moli. Hearing this name, everyone present began to discuss. Nanxian Moli was currently one of the top 5 experts in Genius Base. In terms of strength, he wasn't inferior to an ordinary ruler. He just hadn't advanced. "If I give you 10 times more, the materials I win will be enough for Night Sorrow to forge a new Samsara halberd." Wu Lingfei also heard of Nanxian Moli and knew that he wasn't easy to deal with. However, she really wanted to help Night Sorrow win the materials. "Sister Lingfei, don't agree. Although the materials are precious, they can't be compared to yours. Jing Yun saw Wu Lingfei's hesitant expression and immediately tried to persuade her. Back in the God world, Jing Yun and the rest of the Yi family had called Wu Ling imperial concubine Fei. But in the eternal supreme world, they had come into contact with her a lot, and felt that calling her aunt was too awkward. So, they changed it to Big Sister Imperial Concubine Ling. In reality, Jing Yun was much older than Wu Lingfei. However, like the other daughters-in-law of the Yi family, she subconsciously felt that Wu Lingfei was an elder. Thus, she didn't call her younger sister, but elder sister. But as long as we win this round, the materials we have accumulated for Knight's Sorrow will be enough for him to forge a new Samsara halberd. Wu Lingfei turned to look at Jing Yun. Only then did she realize that Knight's Sorrow was here. The moment she saw Knight's Sorrow, Wu Lingfei was like a child who had done something wrong. She turned her head away in embarrassment. Let me do it. I will fight them. We've clearly set up a trap and are waiting for you to jump in. If nothing unexpected happens, that Nanshan Mo Li's strength definitely surpasses yours by a lot. Looking at Wu Lingfei, Knight's Sorrow once again felt a sense of gratitude rise in his heart. Wu Lingfei was no different from a close relative to him. He immediately transmitted his voice to Wu Lingfei. I know that Nanshan Mo Li is definitely stronger than me. However, those materials with the Samsara attribute can only be found by chance. Wu Lingfei sighed and said, if you hadn't come, I would definitely have agreed. However, since you're here, you will fight. She spoke to Knight's Sorrow before looking at the defeated Chen Haiming and said, I can agree to your bet, but let one of my friends fight. What do you think? After all, I just used my bloodline power and won't be able to recover in a short period of time. Do you want your friend to fight instead? Hearing this, Chen Haiming was silent for a moment before saying, sure. We agree. He was silent for a moment because he was communicating with Nanshan Mo Li. The two of them were relatively clear about the alliance between Wu Lingfei and Jing Yun. They knew that the strongest among them was Huo Huang. Huo Huang's strength ranked in the top 20 of Genius Base and even had the possibility of reaching the top 10. However, Nanshan Mo Li was confident of defeating Huo Huang. All right. Since you've agreed to this bet, let Nanshan Mo Li fight. My friend is already here. Wu Lingfei not only understood Knight's Sorrow's strength, she also had a deep-rooted trust in him. She felt that as long as he was here, she would be at ease. She was very at ease and placed herself in the bet. Auntie Fei, although it's disrespectful to put you in the bet, I'm confident of winning. I'll teach them a lesson. Knight's Sorrow felt that using Wu Lingfei as a bet wasn't good, so he explained. At this moment, Wu Lingfei, who had flown down the stage, said, I believe in your strength and won't take the bet to heart. However, Jing Yun now calls me Sister Lingfei. If you call her Auntie Fei, it'll be a little strange. Just call me Sister Fei in the future. Ah. All right. When Knight's Sorrow heard Wu Lingfei's words, he was very surprised. However, after thinking for a moment, he still tried to call her, Sister Fei. Although he wasn't used to it, he still called her that. In reality, they weren't related by blood. Moreover, in the God realm, age didn't count for much. Calling her Auntie Fei was just a habit. There was nothing wrong with calling her sister. Hee hee. Go on stage. The enemy is already on stage. Help Sister Fei vent her anger of being schemed against. Wu Lingfei smiled sweetly. In her opinion, changing the way they addressed each other was even more difficult than the previous battle. Jing Yun, who was standing to the side, smiled and didn't say anything. She and Wu Lingfei had depended on each other for decades. Their feelings for each other were at the level of life and death. They had also whispered many things. Jing Yun knew a lot of inside information that Knight's Sorrow and the others didn't know. After Knight's Sorrow went on stage, Nanshan Mo Li, who who was standing on the stage, was stunned. Puzzled, he asked, "Who are you?" "I'm Wu Lingfei's friend." Knight Sorrow replied noncommittally. In the Eternal Supreme Realm, he hadn't used the power of virtue to conceal his cultivation. Therefore, Nanshan Mo Li easily saw through Knight Sorrow's cultivation. He sneered, "With your cultivation as a middle divine king, you dare to fight me, Nanshan Mo Li? Aren't you overestimating yourself?" "Whether or not I'm overestimating myself, we'll only know after we fight." Knight Sorrow remained as steady as Mount Tai. His expression was emotionless, and there wasn't any sign of fear. "It looks like you still don't know what kind of person I, Nanshan Mo Li, am." Chapter 2878. The moment Nanshan Mo Li attacked, many people below the stage cried out in surprise. This was because Nanshan Mo Li's strength had clearly increased again. He was more than twice as strong as when he had appeared on the stage 20 years ago. The current him clearly had the strength to enter the top 3 of Genius Base. At this very moment, apart from Wu Lingfei and Jing Yun, no one in the audience felt that Knight Sorrow, this unfamiliar face, would win. "Your strength is already not bad at the Divine King's level, but you're still not qualified to fight me." Originally, Knight Sorrow disdained to bully the Divine King, but Nanshan Mo Li was clearly plotting to bully Wu Lingfei. This was something he could not tolerate at all. Therefore, he was prepared to directly crush his opponent's confidence with his attack. When Nanshan Mo Li attacked with his palm, Knight Sorrow also attacked with his palm, colliding with it. Long before Knight Sorrow had advanced to the middle-level Divine King, he could already fight against the middle-level Sovereign Realm Myriad Sword Master and suppress him by half a head. Although Nanshan Mo Li was considered a genius disciple in Genius Base, how could he be Knight Sorrow's match? Boom! After the two exchanged blows, Nanshan Mo Li was blasted off the stage. In an instant, he was defeated. Furthermore, Nanshan Mo Li, who had been blasted off the stage, crawled for a long time without getting up. Clearly, his injuries were extremely severe. "On account of how hard it was for the Divine Realm to nurture you, I'll spare you this time. Otherwise, you would have already been annihilated for scheming against my family." Nanshan Mo Li was sent flying and could not get up. He looked very wretched, but this was still the result of Knight Sorrow holding back. If he had used his full strength, Nanshan Mo Li would have been killed instantly. Yes, sir. It's Nanshan Mo Li's fault. After Nanshan Mo Li realized Knight Sorrow's strength, he immediately had Chen Hyaming help him up and knelt on the ground to apologize. The shock that Knight Sorrow's attack brought to him was practically fatal. Facing Knight Sorrow was like facing a supreme being. That feeling of powerlessness made him not dare to show the slightest bit of disrespect. The reason why the God world has been able to exist for so long without being destroyed by the eternal Paragon world is because of that. They relied on the many supreme martial artists who were not afraid of sacrificing themselves. They are all people with great boldness. You should learn more from their broad-mindedness. Perhaps it will be beneficial for your future cultivation. Even if you can become a sovereign by relying on crooked methods, your accomplishments will be limited. Knight Sorrow did not continue bickering with Nanshan Mo Li. Instead, he talked about the matter of his heart. Upon hearing this, Nanshan Mo Li felt as though he had been struck by lightning. Then, he kowtowed 3 times to Knight Sorrow. "Nanshan Mo Li thanks Benefactor for enlightening me. How should I address you, Benefactor?" "My name is Knight Sorrow." Knight Sorrow said before sending a voice transmission to Wu Lingfei and Jing Yun to leave with them. He didn't even take the bet that Nanshan Mo Li had lost. After saying that, Knight Sorrow felt that if he took the bet again, he would fall too low. After Knight Sorrow left with the 2 women, the crowd around the challenge stage did not disperse for a long time. Everyone was asking about Knight Sorrow's origins. They wanted to know where he came from and why he could explode with such battle prowess when he was only a medium divine king. They had originally thought that the god world had no geniuses that could contend against the other territories. Now, they felt a bit more confident. Haha. Very good. Today's matter will definitely have a positive impact on the divine king of Genius Base. Ancestor Phoenix, who hadn't left with Night Sorrow and the others, hid in the shadows and observed for a while. Then, she revealed a gratified smile. No matter what, the most important thing in cultivation was confidence. Originally, the people present had no confidence in the god world's future. Because they knew that the new genius sovereigns of the god world had all come from their side. Those who had ascended from the god world were pitifully few. Although there were many outstanding ones, there were no truly heaven-defying ones. Now that Night Sorrow had appeared, they realized that there were still geniuses in the god world. Aunt Faye. No. Sister Faye, don't do such dangerous battles in the future. It's okay to spar, but there's no need to gamble. Night Sorrow, who had left the challenge stage, said politely to Wuling Fei. Then, he looked at Jing Yun and said, "Same for you. You two just take care of yourselves. I can go and obtain the resources myself." Okay. I got it. Jing Yun smiled and pulled Night Sorrow's arm. I'll bring you to see the Dragon Sparrow King and the others. Okay. I haven't seen them for decades. I miss them a little. Night Sorrow nodded. At this time, Wuling Fei clearly wanted to say something, but in the end, she hesitated and gave up. However, Yi Shang didn't notice this. When he was with his family, he would restrain his vigilance and get along like an ordinary person. After meeting the Dragon Sparrow King, Fire Phoenix King, and Fire Phoenix King, Night Sorrow realized that the Fire Phoenix King's improvement was not small. Speaking of which, she should be able to be considered a half-step sovereign now. Her cultivation realm was at the Divine King's level, but she could use the laws of the sovereign realm to attack. As for the Dragon Sparrow King and Fire Phoenix King, although they couldn't be compared to the Fire Phoenix King, their improvement was not small either. Their cultivation was not low to begin with. After decades of cultivation, they had clearly taken a step closer to the half-step sovereign realm. Very good. Seeing that everyone had improved a lot, I was relieved. After leaving the Genius Base today, I'll head to the hunting area to kill wild beasts and search for resources. I heard that the Eternal Supreme Realm is full of treasures. I'll try to forge a sovereign divine weapon for each of you as soon as possible. After Jing Yun set up a banquet for everyone, Night Sorrow took a sip of wine and told everyone about his recent plans. Before heading to the battle for Providence, he would come again. Thus, this time, he didn't plan to talk about the battle for Providence. However, when she heard Night Sorrow say that he would leave the safe zone to hunt wild beasts, Wuling Fei's expression changed. She said worriedly, "Night Sorrow, what we need now is strength. We don't really need the help of divine weapons. Just take care of yourself. Don't let yourself fall into a predicament. Don't worry, Sister Fei. I know what I'm doing. Let's drink." Since Night Sorrow had promised, he didn't repeat himself. After replying Wuling Fei, he raised his wine cup and toasted. Then, like mortals, they began to drink without the slightest hesitation. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 dishes, even Night Sorrow felt a little tipsy. When they returned to Jing Yun's residence, both Night Sorrow and Jing Yun were somewhat aroused. Under the influence of alcohol, they began to spar. When he woke up the next day, Night Sorrow sighed slightly. He didn't want to leave this gentle home. However, after a moment of silence, he climbed out of bed, said a few words to Jing Yun, and went to find the Myriad Sword Sect. Chapter 2879. After spending a night with Jing Yun, he didn't even exchange pleasantries with Wu Lingfei before leaving. In truth, Knight Sorrow was very reluctant to leave. However, he carried the fate of the entire celestial realm on his shoulders. He didn't want to relax at all. Knight Sorrow's plan was that if Myriad Sword Sect didn't come out of seclusion, he, Shuechang Tian, Yuan Fengxue, or Murong Zhenlu would head to the edge of the safe zone. After all, he wasn't familiar with the celestial realm. It would be much more convenient to bring someone along. When Knight Sorrow arrived at Myriad Sword Sect's residence, Shuechang Tian, Yuan Fengxue, and Murong Zhenlu were still guarding the place. Myriad Sword Sect hadn't come out of seclusion yet. After greeting the three, Knight Sorrow looked at them and said, "The matter at Genius Base has been settled. I want to go to the hunting zone to hunt some wild beasts. I wonder if any of you are interested in going with me. All of us want to go together. However, we've already promised Brother One that we'll guard him. If he doesn't come out of seclusion, we can't go back on our words." Shuechang Tian said. As for the idea of calling Myriad Sword Sect out in advance, it was just a thought. They wouldn't do it unless it was a crucial matter. I've thought about this problem. That's why I've prepared a formation for Brother Wan. This formation's power is equivalent to a sovereign's. Therefore, it won't be too much of an issue if one of you comes with me to the hunting zone. Hearing Shuechang Tian's words, Yi Shang explained with a smile. In the Eternal Supreme World, although the heaven and earth formation diagrams couldn't display the same miraculous effects as they did in the celestial realm, some of the formations could still be improved. Knight Sorrow, who had absorbed a large amount of Sovereign's laws and essence, was confident that he could set up a formation with astonishing defensive power. That's a good idea. If Brother Ye's formation is really effective, we can send one of us to go with you. It won't be a problem. Murong Zhenlu was interested when he heard Knight Sorrow's words. Although Yuan Fengxue didn't plan on leaving early, he also looked at Knight Sorrow and said, "I wonder if Brother Yi has the materials to set up a Dominator-ranked defensive array. I don't have a lot of materials on hand, but I can barely set up a simple formation." Knight Sorrow replied truthfully. He did not have many materials on hand, but it was not a problem for him to set up a formation. These were the laws and essences that the autarchs had bestowed upon the invincible sovereigns. G0 and, then, Brother Yi, please broaden our horizons. As for the materials, we'll share them among ourselves. In the future, the three of us and Brother Wan will return them to Brother Yi. Shuechang Tian said embarrassedly. At this moment, they were indeed a little poor. After all, in the divine world, the main way to obtain resources was to fight in the hunting zone. The three of them had always been with the other two, advancing and retreating in unison with the Myriad Sword Sect. Everything was done with the Myriad Sword Sect in mind. Most of the resources that the 10,000 Sword Sect obtained from the territories of the God Realm. Ha! Brother Shui is treating me like an outsider by saying this. It's just some materials, no need to mention them. Knight Sorrow said casually, then began to set up a formation. After about 4 hours, an offensive formation that was based on the Great Killing Formation of Heaven and Earth was set up. This formation will automatically counterattack when attacked. However, this is only the first part, there's still the defensive part. After setting up the offensive formation, Knight Sorrow said, then spend another 4 hours setting up a defensive formation. Once the defensive formation was set up, the Myriad Sword Sect's residence was completely integrated. Moreover, from outside, it was impossible to see what was going on inside. Wonderful. Truly wonderful. Murong Guizhao, who had left the residence to observe the situation outside, was full of praise for Knight Sorrow's formation. In the divine world, most people would be extremely cautious when making a move. Now that they had an offensive and defensive formation, no one would dare to bump into the muzzle of a gun. Shuechang Tian and Yuan Fengxue also nodded, indicating that with this formation, even if several people went to the hunting zone, no one would dare to make a move against the Myriad Sword sect. Although they said so, the two of them were obviously not going to leave. In the end, it was decided that Murong Guizhao would go with Night Sorrow. Brother Yi, although the hunting zone doesn't sound like much, it's extremely dangerous to go out and hunt. Murong Guizhao explained carefully as they left the Myriad Sword sect's residence and rushed to the edge of the safe zone. Firstly, the wild beasts are very strong. Ordinary cultivators of the same level are no match for wild beasts. Secondly, there are some primitive tribes in the hunting zone. They are very hostile towards us. When they see us, they will send out a large number of people to surround and kill us. Also, because of the terrain of the divine world, there are often cultivators from other realms who sneak into the hunting zone. The most important thing was that in the hunting area, there were many ruins, traps, and formations left behind from ancient times. These were all very dangerous. We must be careful. All right. We will try our best to be careful. I have a certain understanding of formations. It will be of some help to this trip. Night Sorrow said slowly. He was very cautious about this trip. He knew that the cruelty of the outside world was much worse than what Murong Guizhao had said. After all, they might encounter a supreme-level wild beast or a tribe's expert. Furthermore, most heaven and earth treasures would be accompanied by danger. Brother Yi, I heard that you have only cultivated for a few thousand years. Is that true? Murong Guizhao asked curiously as they continued on their way. He had heard about it from the Myriad Sword sect, but he felt that it was a bit exaggerated. After all, everyone including him had cultivated for at least 2 or 3 eras. Some had even cultivated for many reincarnations. It's true. However, I have a time artifact with 100 times effect in the lower realm. If I include that time, a few thousand years is definitely not enough. Yi Shang replied honestly. He had never calculated the time he had spent cultivating because he did not care about fame and reputation. That's too admirable. Speaking of time artifacts, our divine world territory only has 3 times the effect. It is too far away from the powerful territories. Moreover, we do not have enough resources to support everyone's cultivation. This is also one of the reasons why our divine world territory is getting weaker and weaker. Ordinary territories will have 10 times or even 20 times the effect of time artifacts. Murong Guizhao sighed at the mention of time artifacts. For the divine world, time was not very valuable. However, for the eternal supreme world, this was not the case. Most of the time, time artifacts and cultivation resources represented everything. Chapter 2880. If I can get some time attribute materials, I might be able to refine a better spatial artifact when I reach the Dominator level. Although the time and space laws in the eternal supreme world were much more stable than the God realm, Night Sorrow felt that he might be able to refine a better spatial artifact after reaching the Dominator level. Murong Zhenlu sighed, I'm afraid it won't be easy to do that. After all, the City Lord is a brilliant supreme being, but he can only refine a spatial artifact with 3 times the time. The chances of him being able to refine something better are still a little slim. Where there's a will, there's a way. Night Sorrow smiled and continued, oh right, Zhenlu, according to what you said, supreme beings can't hunt Dominator-level wild beasts in the hunting zone, so what do they do on a daily basis? Why do I feel that they're all very busy? They don't look like they have nothing to do. It's even harder than the Dominators. Murong Zhenlu shook his head. If supreme beings want normal resources, they have to go to the supreme space. That's the battlefield of supreme beings. Moreover, there's no such thing as a territory. Supreme beings who enter will not only encounter powerful wild beasts, but also supreme beings from other realms. Every battle is very tragic. The City Lord went missing when he was exploring a ruin in the supreme space. He said it vaguely, but it was still possible to feel that the city lord might have fallen in that ruin. Hearing this, Yi Shang nodded and didn't say anything else. However, a strong desire to do battle rose in his heart. He definitely didn't have the right to enter the sovereign realm at the moment. Therefore, he had to hurry and obtain resources in the sovereign realm's hunting zone so that he could reach the sovereign realm as soon as possible. Murong Junlu didn't say anything else. To them, it was still too early to talk about supreme beings, so they didn't want to talk too much about it. When they reached the edge of the safe zone and reached the God Realm's defense line, Murong Junlu pointed to a city and said, "This city is the God Realm's last line of defense, called Peace City." The meaning of Peace City is to hope that every cultivator who enters the hunting zone can return safely. However, the cultivators who go out to hunt only have a 10% chance of returning unscathed, and a 90% chance of being injured or killed. Sovereigns are in danger of dying at any moment. The eternal paragon world really is cruel. Knight Sorrow immediately felt a wave of sadness as he listened to Murong's instructions. Don't laugh lying drunk on the battlefield. Since ancient times, how many people have returned from a campaign? This was the portrayal of his heart at this moment. Let's go. Let's enter the city and pay a visit to the Golden Crow who is guarding the city. He is the fourth strongest expert in the divine world, second only to the city lord and the two vice city lords, but he has been guarding the city all this time. Speaking of the Golden Crow sovereign, Murong Jilu's face was full of reverence. Although he was the fourth strongest expert of the divine world, he had always been guarding Peace City in a low-key manner. Many sovereigns of the divine world were saved by him. The Golden Crow. Could he be the ancestor of the divine world's Golden Crow clan? Upon hearing the name Golden Crow Sovereign, Knight Sorrow immediately thought of the Golden Crow clan in the God Realm. Yes. The Golden Crow Paragon also ascended from the God Realm several reincarnations ago. Murong pointed the way and explained to Knight Sorrow. So the Golden Crow clan also has such a hero. Thinking of the Golden Crow clan that he once had a conflict with, Knight Sorrow sighed. He did not expect the Golden Crow clan to have a Golden Crow sovereign. Moreover, this Golden Crow sovereign had the courage to protect the mountains and rivers. Knight Sorrow said excitedly, "Let's go and pay a visit to the Golden Crow sovereign." At this time, Murong Jilu smiled and said, "If you want to leave the city, you must get the Golden Crow sovereign's permission. If he doesn't think highly of someone who insists on leaving the city, the result won't be good." So that's how it is, I understand. Knight Sorrow nodded and followed Murong Jilu to find the Golden Crow sovereign who was guarding Peace City. Different from what Knight Sorrow imagined, the Golden Crow sovereign did not live in Peace City. Instead, he sat cross-legged outside the city, at the edge of the hunting area. Murong Jilu greets the Golden Crow sovereign. Knight Sorrow greets the Golden Crow sovereign. Knowing that the Golden Crow sovereign had been guarding Peace City for thousands of years, Knight Sorrow was very moved. He was a person who cared about his country, and now he was full of admiration for the Golden Crow sovereign. Hee. Jilu, I brought a new friend with me this time. Are you going to hunt a desolate beast together? Let me see his strength. Knight Sorrow and Murong Jilu bowed. The Golden Crow sovereign, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, waved his hand to indicate that there was no need for that. He opened his eyes and looked at Knight Sorrow. Then, his eyes lit up and he stood up and said, "The middle stage Divine King's realm and the upper stage Sovereign Strength. You are the future leader of the Sovereign Realm of the Divine Realm. The Golden Crow Sovereign is too kind. Knight Sorrow does not deserve such praise." Knight Sorrow hurriedly said politely. This was not hypocritical modesty, but a matter of etiquette. Ha! If you don't dare to accept it, then no one can. The Golden Crow sovereign had the appearance of a skinny old man. As he stood up and sized up Knight Sorrow, a gratified smile appeared on his face. Moreover, there was a dense mist in his eyes. He was obviously excited. The Golden Crow's sovereign actually stood up. Murongjilu, who saw this scene, was completely shocked. He had broken through to the sovereign realm many years ago, but he had never heard of the Golden Crow's sovereign standing up for anyone. Thank you for the sovereign's praise. As for Night Sorrow, he was not aware of this. He first bowed modestly and then asked, Golden Crow's sovereign, I wonder if the Golden Crow clan in the Divine Realm is your descendant. Oh. You are from the Divine Realm. Do you know the Golden Crow clan? The Golden Crow's sovereign, who was already excited, immediately trembled when he heard Night Sorrow's words. To tell you the truth, the Golden Crow clan and I became friends after a fight. Before I left, the Divine King Jin Nye had always been in my Divine Realm. Other than the Divine King Jin Nye, there are 2 other sovereigns in the Golden Crow clan, as well as some other monarchs. Night Sorrow did not hide anything. He was very glad that he could bring news of his hometown to the Golden Crow sovereign. ATR-0H Kel, although the Golden Crow clan in the Divine Realm is my descendant, no one should know of my existence. After all, I have been in the Eternal Supreme Realm for too long. The Golden Crow's sovereign was a little sad when he mentioned the Golden Crow clan in the Divine Realm. Chapter 2881. Thank you, Supreme Golden Crow. Thank you for your hard work. Although Murong Guides the Way did not mention anything about this, Night Sorrow still understood from the Supreme Golden Crow's words that the Supreme Golden Crow had always been outside Peace City to illuminate the way back for the God Realm's cultivators, so that they would not get lost in the hunting area. Night Sorrow understood and bowed to the Supreme Golden Crow again. Ha! Go! In our God Realm's hunting area, there are a total of 7 forbidden areas, try not to step into them. The Supreme Golden Crow smiled and continued to sit cross-legged on the ground. There was not even a praying mat under him. Night Sorrow felt an inexplicable heartache seeing this. He calmed down and cupped his fists. Supreme Golden Crow, Night Sorrow will do his best to change the God Realm's unfavorable situation. I believe in you. The Supreme Golden Crow nodded and looked at Murong Guides. Be a good guide for Night Sorrow. You will be by his side in the future. Yes. I will follow the orders of the Supreme Golden Crow. Murong Guides the Way first bowed and then looked at Night Sorrow. Brother Yi, let's go. All right. Night Sorrow replied and bid farewell to the Supreme Golden Crow. Together with Murong Guides the Way, they walked into the depths of the hunting area. After entering the hunting area for about 3,000 miles, Night Sorrow could feel a suffocating aura of killing and a thick smell of blood. This is the blood of a ruler that did not disperse for a long time after he was killed. The fallen ruler was called Sky-Bearing. He was originally a great genius of our God realm. But 7 reincarnations ago, he fell into a primitive tribe's trap and was chased all the way until he was killed here. Since then, the Supreme Golden Crow has been guarding outside Peace City. As long as the returning God Realm cultivators enter within 10,000 miles of Peace City, they will be protected by him. Over the past few reincarnations, Supreme Golden Crow has saved over 100 people. Murong Guides the Way explained the origin of the smell of blood to Night Sorrow. Looks like the competition in the hunting zone is indeed fierce. Although 100 people wasn't a large number, each and every one of them was a ruler. Night Sorrow sighed with emotion, but at the same time, he also fully understood the cruelty of the hunting zone. At this moment, he opened his mouth and said, "Give me a brief introduction about the primitive tribes." All right. Murong pointed the way and replied, "The so-called primitive tribes is actually just a name that we God Realm cultivators came up with for them. These natives are different from us cultivators. They have green faces and fangs, and they look very similar to wild beasts. They worship evil gods, and every tribe is extremely bloodthirsty. When they see us cultivators, they want to eat us alive. Furthermore, they like to live in groups. When they attack, they will swarm together. If we encounter dozens of Dominator-rank natives, it will be difficult to deal with them. However, we'll deal with whatever comes our way. If we encounter them, we'll think of a solution. Now, let's officially begin the hunt. After Night Sorrow said this, he summoned Cao Ling. At this moment, under Night Sorrow's full nurturing, Cao Ling had already advanced to the level of a middle celestial lord. She was also slightly taller. Including the 2 horns on her head, she was about 1.5 meters tall. Big brother Night Sorrow, the aura here is too scary. Ling is a little scared. After being summoned, Cao Ling didn't even have time to use her race's skill before her entire body started to tremble. She obviously couldn't get used to the terrifying aura of the hunting zone, and fear came from the depths of her soul. Ling, don't be scared. Night Sorrow condensed his god territory and power of merit, enveloping Cao Ling. He asked, Ling, how do you feel now? I feel much better now. Cao Ling smiled and began to use her horns to check if there were any treasures around. While Cao Ling was checking her surroundings, Murong Ziliu asked curiously, isn't this the descendant of the Horn Clan's sovereign? This is the strength of a divine lord. Did you bring her to the Eternal Supreme World? I brought her here. We are friends. Ling is still young, so her realm is a little low. However, her talent is not bad. Her future achievements won't be bad. Night Sorrow explained. Horn Ancestor Sovereign knew about Cao Ling, but let her follow Night Sorrow. As for the other members of the Horn Clan, they had already been arranged by the Horn Clan's sovereign. Very good. With Ling Er's help, we might not only be able to hunt desolate beasts this time, but also find some treasures. Murong Ziliu was clear about the Horn Clan's abilities and said with a smile. At this moment, he suddenly thought of Yi Shang of the Xian race of Shao Tianyuan. He asked, guide the way. Have you heard of the ruler called Shao Tianxian? Shao Tianxian. I've heard of him. He ascended from the god world and is highly valued by the sovereigns. His level of importance is second only to Brother Wan. He seems to be in seclusion to break through to the intermediate sovereign realm. When Murong Ziliu told him about Shao Tianxian, Night Sorrow sighed in relief. The Eternal Supreme World was so cruel. He was afraid that Shao Tianxian had already fallen. Knowing that Shao Tianxian was fine, Night Sorrow was relieved and locked his gaze on Cao Ling. After a while, Cao Ling shook her head and said, Big brother Night Sorrow, this place is not the same as the God world. In the God world, Ling can sense the treasures within a few 100,000 li radius. But here, her range is only 8,000 li. Within 8,000 miles around us, there are no natural treasures. The Eternal Supreme World is even more, Night Sorrow explained to Cao Ling, with a smile, but just as he said this, a deafening roar came from afar. Desolate beast. This is one of the desolate beasts called the heaven-defying fire blade. Judging from the sound, it should be fighting. Logically speaking, the heaven-defying fire blade shouldn't appear in this place. After Yi Shang used his divine domain to protect Jiao Ling, and put her back into the spatial grotto heaven, Murong pointed into the distance. Let's go take a look, G0. After Murong Zhenlu said the name of the heaven-defying fire blade, he began to talk about its characteristics. Night Sorrow directly opened the sea serpent's eye and looked into the distance while asking Murong Zhenlu to follow. In the hunting area, there were almost no desolate beasts below the sovereign realm. Night Sorrow and Murong Zhenlu did not dare to be careless. They carefully rushed towards the heaven-defying fire blade's roar. So this is a desolate beast. A sovereign realm desolate beast is really not simple. When they got closer, Night Sorrow saw the heaven-defying fire blade that Murong Jinlu mentioned was fighting with a cultivator. They seemed to be fighting over something. This cultivator was a male cultivator, but he had a very otherworldly aura, giving people a feeling of floating immortality. Night Sorrow glanced at him and locked his gaze on the heaven-defying fire blade. He discovered that this heaven-defying fire blade was about the height of 10 people. Its head looked like a skull, but there was some skin on it. It wore silver armor and held 2 red blades that seemed to be made of lava in its hands. Chapter 2882. What? That cultivator fighting heaven-defying fire blade isn't from the celestial realm, he's from the celestial realm. How are we going to settle this? Night Sorrow was flabbergasted by Murong Guelu's words. The male cultivator in front of him didn't look any different from a human cultivator, except that he was a little more feminine and had a different temperament. He didn't expect him to come from a different realm from the celestial realm. The territories of each realm are different. The celestial realm has its own territory, he's obviously poaching here. According to the Eternal Sovereign's rules, cultivators from other realms are not allowed to enter the celestial realm's hunting grounds. Murong Guelu said unhappily, sizing up the male cultivator from the celestial realm. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go, take down this male cultivator from the celestial realm first, then kill heaven-defying fire blade. Night Sorrow opened his sea serpent eye and released his divine sense to sense the opponent's strength. He was a middle dominator, about the same cultivation as Master Myriad Sword. He knew that since he and Murong Guelu had discovered the male cultivator, he must have discovered them as well. In front of him, the male cultivator was still fighting with the heaven-defying fire blade. Obviously, he did not put him and Murong Jinlu in his eyes. In that case, Night Sorrow wasn't going to be polite. But he's from the celestial realm, which is ranked in the top 1,000. Our celestial realm is only in the 9,000th, the difference in strength is too great. If we offend him, we'll suffer retribution. After Yi Shang finished speaking, Murong Guelu revealed a troubled expression. The people from the heaven immortal realm were poaching right in front of them. Furthermore, they did not place them in their eyes at all. They were simply ignoring them. This was simply too arrogant. However, the celestial realm's strength was much weaker than the other party. If they offended him, the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. Although Murong Zijin knew that Night Sorrow's strength was valiant and might not be inferior to his opponent, he was still cowering and somewhat fearful. Guelu. Let me tell you something. If someone pees on your leg and you pretend you don't see it, he'll ride on your neck and pee on you next time. You stand here and watch me destroy him. Night Sorrow was well aware of Murong Zijin's worries, but ever since he started cultivating, he understood that in the world of cultivation, blindly enduring would not earn him any respect. If he didn't want the other party to bully him, the only way was to fight back and beat him into submission. After telling Murong Zijin the way, Night Sorrow soared into the sky and rushed towards the battle between the male cultivators of the heaven immortal realm and the heaven-defying fire blade. Humph! Divine King Realm Ants. Not even the sovereigns of your divine world would dare to make a move, yet you've come here to throw your life away. You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Seeing Night Sorrow's attack, the male cultivator from the heaven immortal realm laughed instead of being shocked. He glanced at Night Sorrow with disdain, then raised his hand and pointed. His fingers seemed very casual, but the energy contained within it gave off the feeling of connecting with heaven and earth. Its power was extremely shocking. If it had been an ordinary divine king, he would have been blasted to smithereens. Watch out, Brother Yi. Murong Zijin couldn't just stand by and watch when he saw the male cultivator from the heaven immortal realm attack. At the same time, he immediately chased after Night Sorrow. Just a small trick. Night Sorrow snorted disdainfully in the face of the attack from the Heaven Immortal realm and pointed with his finger as well. This finger contained a trace of the Sovereign's laws. It directly scattered the opponent's finger and attacked the male cultivator from the Heaven Immortal realm. Who would have thought that a divine king with decent talent would appear in this trash realm? The male cultivator from the Heaven Immortal realm clearly hadn't expected that his attack would be blocked by a divine king and that his opponent would counterattack. While resisting the heaven-defying fire blade, he pointed again and neutralized the energy from Night Sorrow's attack. Clang! At this moment, the heaven-defying fire blade suddenly chopped down on the male cultivator's shoulder. The huge blade smashed into the male cultivator's body and slammed him into the ground. Damn it! Trash cultivators from the heavenly realm, how dare you injure me? Both of you must die. Seal the sky spell. The male cultivator from the Heaven Immortal realm was instantly enraged after being injured. He jumped up from the ground and threw a talisman at the heaven-defying fire blade in midair. The heaven-defying fire blade was instantly stunned and motionless when it was hit by the talisman. What kind of technique is this? If we're hit, will we be sealed like the heaven-defying fire blade? Night Sorrow was slightly taken aback by the opponent's technique. He transmitted his voice to Murong Zijin and asked. This is a talisman refined by a sovereign. It can seal ordinary wild beasts, but it has no effect on cultivators. As Murong Zijin explained to Night Sorrow, he threw the feather fan in his hand into the air. After the feather fan was thrown into the air, it immediately split into 99 feathers and shot toward the male cultivator from the Heaven Immortal realm. How could he, who was already in a bad mood, tolerate the other party's attack? Your technique is not bad, but your power is still too weak. Cultivators from the Heaven Immortal realm are all good-looking but useless trash. Every feather Murong Zijin shot out was a Dominator-level attack. The range of this attack was very large, and in a more stable world like the Eternal Supreme Realm, it was very difficult to dodge. However, the male cultivator from the Heaven Immortal realm laughed disdainfully in the face of his comprehension. At the same time, the male cultivator took out an umbrella-shaped Dominator-level artifact and threw it into the air. It immediately emitted 100 zhang of golden light. The golden light formed a defensive barrier that blocked all of Murong Zijin's feathers. If the feather fan doesn't work, there's still a paper fan. Murong Zijin didn't stop his attack even though the feather fan was blocked. Instead, he took out a paper fan and attacked again. This time, the paper fan didn't leave his hand. Instead, he blasted out a tornado that reached the sky. Ha ha! I already said that you Heaven Immortal realm cultivators are good-looking but useless trash. Break! In the face of Murong Zijin's attack, the Heaven Immortal realm cultivator once again raised a disdainful smile and roared the word break. This roar actually scattered Murong Zijin's attack. What? It was broken so easily. Although Murong Zijin was a lesser dominator, he still had some confidence in his own strength. After all, he was one of the young geniuses nurtured by the Heaven Immortal realm and hadn't cultivated for too long. His attack couldn't break through his opponent's defense at all. This was a big blow to his confidence. Although both sides were only probing each other's strength, Murong Zijin was certain that this male cultivator from the Heaven Immortal realm was stronger than the myriad swords sect before he went into seclusion. He couldn't help but look at Night Sorrow. He was worried that the two of them together wouldn't be a match for the Heaven Immortal realm cultivator. Don't worry. Chapter 2883. Night Sorrow hadn't made a move when Murong Guides the Way had attacked. Although he'd called for them to attack together, he didn't think it would be a 2-on-1 fight. He should be able to handle it. All right. Brother Yi. Then it's up to you. Although Night Sorrow was only a lesser divine king, Murong Guides the Way knew that he wasn't weak at all. At the very least, he wasn't inferior to the myriad sword sect. Humph. You mid-level Divine King Ant, do you really think you can fight me just because you were lucky enough to break one of my moves? Knight Zoro's words completely enraged the Celestial Realm male cultivator. In his opinion, the Divine King was still the Divine King. There was a world of difference between him and the Sovereign. To the Divine King, the Sovereign was an existence that couldn't be offended. Knight Zoro had said he wanted to fight him one-on-one. This immediately enraged the Celestial Realm male cultivator. You'll know once you try whether or not we can fight. Although Knight Zoro looked down on the Celestial Realm male cultivator, he still took him seriously. After all, this was his first time fighting someone from another realm since coming to the Divine Realm. I'll give it a try then. Remember, the one who's going to kill you is Ji-Yun. Celestial Immortal Beheading Sword. Ji-Yun of the Celestial Immortal Realm roared and unsheathed his sword, slashing at Yi Shang. This sword strike of his was very elegant and nimble, with a bit of a fluttering immortal flavor. Celestial Immortal Beheading Sword? Not bad, but I'm not a demon. You can't cut me. In the face of Ji-Yun's oppressive divine domain, Knight Zoro immediately unleashed the power of good karma around him and shattered it. Then he released his divine domain, which contained the laws of the Sovereign, and used the great immortal sword art he'd learned from the myriad sword sect to transform himself into a giant sword. Ji-Yun's sword was as ethereal as an immortal's. The giant sword that Knight Zoro had transformed into had the meaning of a heavy sword without a sharp edge. Boom! After the two of them collided, some of the ancient trees around them were shaken to the ground. Even the heaven-defying fire blade, which was sealed by the talisman, simply fell down. The result of this exchange was that Knight Zoro had the upper hand. The reason for that was because he was not injured at all. On the other hand, Ji-Yun's sword had been directly shattered. Furthermore, he had suffered quite a bit of injury. If that's all you've got, I'll capture you alive and bring you back to the divine world. Knight Zoro didn't get carried away even though he had gained the upper hand with one strike. This was his first time fighting against the ruler of another realm, so he wasn't sure if his opponent had any trump cards up his sleeve. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! I will make you understand that an ant will always be an ant. Ji-Yun, who had suffered losses consecutively, was not only furious, but had also gone completely mad. He raised his head and roared 3 times before activating a jade talisman. After activating the jade talisman, it was immediately covered in a layer of green light. Being enveloped by this green light, Ji-Yun's aura increased by 6 to 7 times. World Annihilating Immortal Dust Art. After increasing his strength, Ji-Yun leapt into the air and directly jumped into the clouds. Then, 2 enormous transparent wings of light suddenly grew out of his back. When these wings of light stretched out, they were roughly 100 meters long. After Ji-Yun roared out the world-annihilating immortal dust art, he used the wings of light behind him to launch an attack that contained the aura of annihilation. The attributes of this attack seemed somewhat heterogeneous. It was mainly of the wind attribute, but it also contained a large amount of destructive aura. Brother Yi, be careful. This is one of the strongest techniques of the divine immortal realm. Seeing Ji-Yun use the world-annihilating immortal dust art, Murong Guides the Way immediately raised Knight Zoro's level by 1. In fact, even without Murong Guides the Way's warning, Knight Zoro could feel the power of this attack. 33 Heaven's Secret Battle Art. Facing this world-annihilating immortal dust art, Knight Zoro immediately used the secret art of the Tristramsa Heavens, breaking through to the God King level and absorbing the laws and essence of the invincible hegemon. Now that he used this secret art, his power instantly increased by roughly 25 times. Now that he used it, the aura around him instantly became stronger. Reincarnation Spear Art. After increasing his strength, Knight Zoro, who was originally preparing to use the great immortal sword art, suddenly had a flash of insight. He immediately used his own aura to condense a reincarnation halberd and fiercely attacked Ji Yun. It collided with the world-annihilating immortal dust art. After a series of explosions, the two of them were evenly matched. However, Ji Yun's wings of light dimmed in an instant. Night Sorrow, on the other hand, didn't suffer any major injuries. He just consumed a bit more energy. He had always liked to use the spear, so using the great immortal sword art was somewhat awkward. Using the improved reincarnation spear art felt very refreshing. What? You're actually unharmed. This seat still underestimated you. Ji Yun's eyes widened when he saw that not only was Yi Shan uninjured, but he was also in high spirits. The attack just now was already his strongest attack without using any external power, but it still couldn't defeat a mid-level divine king. This made him completely uneasy. At this point, you still call yourself this seat? How laughable. You're about to become a prisoner, so you'd better put away your arrogance. Seeing Ji Yun's reaction, Night Sorrow, who was extremely experienced in battle, immediately judged his strength. He suddenly used the Divine Origin Trap formation, directly locking Ji Yun in the void. Before Ji Yun could react, he entered the sealed space and started a fierce close combat with him. This Ji Yun came from the heavenly immortal realm. Not only did he look a bit feminine, but he also didn't excel in close combat. Trapped in the sealed space, he was quickly suppressed by Night Sorrow. Hi, Ji Yun, come from the heavenly immortal realm. Your strength is not bad, but I advise you to let me leave safely. Otherwise, your leader of the heavenly immortal realm will suffer a destructive blow. After Ji Yun realized that he was not Night Sorrow's opponent, he immediately threatened him with an overbearing aura. Seeing Ji Yun's arrogant face, Night Sorrow smiled and said, "Don't think too highly of yourself, and don't underestimate others. If you could destroy my heavenly immortal realm, I believe your heavenly immortal realm would have done so long ago. Moreover, a ruler of your level wouldn't be considered outstanding in the heavenly immortal realm. No one would care about your life or death." Even as he replied, Night Sorrow didn't back down in the slightest. He continued to suppress Ji Yun. It didn't take long for Ji Yun to be completely captured. In truth, Ji Yun still had a trump card, but Night Sorrow had suddenly launched a close combat attack, so he didn't have the opportunity to use it. After capturing him, Night Sorrow immediately sealed Ji Yun's divine origin force and divine soul power, then put him into the heavenly immortal realm. Just you wait, the entire heavenly immortal realm will wait. My elder brother and father won't let you off. My elder brother is one of the top 1,000 rulers in the sovereign realm. My father. After being put into Night Sorrow's heavenly immortal realm, Ji Yun roared with indignation. Chapter 2884. Night Sorrow. There are tens of thousands of realms in the sovereign realm, and countless sovereigns. To be able to rank in the top 1,000, their strength is not to be underestimated. We still need to be careful. Night Sorrow didn't pay much attention to Ji Yun's words, but Murong Zijin reminded him nervously. In my opinion, the strength of the other party is not important. What's important is that when others slap us in the face, we have to slap them back. If we are not as strong as them, we will work hard to improve until we have the strength to fight back. Murong Zijin's words were said with good intentions, Night Sorrow knew, but he had his own principles, so he followed his heart and said. Perhaps you are right. Our God realm is too tolerant in some aspects, which led to the other realms becoming more aggressive. We have always been worried about being destroyed, but being tolerant will not help us at all. There must be another reason why we are not destroyed. After Night Sorrow finished speaking, Murong Zijin was silent for a while, then said. The nearby realms are probably waiting for our God realm's fortune to disappear completely, no longer protected by the laws of the Eternal Supreme Realm, then they will launch a large-scale attack. However, I will not let that happen. Although he didn't know much about the Eternal Supreme Realm, Knight Sorrow could understand the current situation. The future of the God Realm is entrusted to Brother Yi and Brother Wan. Also, that Xiao Tianxian you mentioned seems to have some strength. As for the rest of us, we are not even worth mentioning. Murong Zizhen sighed. He knew his own strength well. On the list of sovereigns, he couldn't even enter the top 100,000. In the battle for fortune a few decades later, he wouldn't be able to contribute much. He could only place his hopes on Knight Sorrow and the Myriad Sword sect. I wonder if Sect Master Xiao has been cultivating for less than 3 years. At this time, Knight Sorrow said doubtfully. Xiao Tianxian was the sect master of Tianyun School. He always thought that he was an old monster who had been cultivating for a long time. Murong Zizhen smiled, definitely not 3 years, otherwise the sovereigns wouldn't have nurtured him like this. That makes sense. He was once the sect master of my sect, but I really don't know how long he has been cultivating. Knight Sorrow said with a smile. Then, he looked at the sealed heaven-defying fire blade and said, how should we deal with this heaven-defying fire blade? Ha! Normally, the supremes of our divine world wouldn't refine this kind of sealing talisman. Now that it has been sealed by Ji Yun, we can take advantage of it and bring it back to our heavenly abode. We can exchange it for a lot of things. Murong Zhenlu said with a smile. Capturing a heaven-defying fire blade alive was not an easy task. The resources that could be exchanged for would be several times more than a dead one. Alright, then I'll keep it in my space paradise. What I mean is to continue hunting desolate beasts and searching for resources. What do you think? Knight Sorrow asked as he kept the heaven-defying fire blade in his space paradise. Then let's continue hunting desolate beasts. I also feel that there's no point in going back right after coming out. In the battle just now, Murong Zhenlu had already realized Knight Sorrow's strength. He felt that traveling with him would not be a problem in terms of safety. Thus, he nodded and agreed to continue traveling. What kind of places in a hunting zone have more resources? After that, Knight Sorrow and Murong Zhenlu searched for 2 days in the hunting zone. They did not find any resources and only encountered a desolate beast. After killing the desolate beast, Knight Sorrow asked. If we're talking about places with more resources, then it's definitely the 7 forbidden zones. However, the death rate of the 7 forbidden zones is too high. If a sovereign realm cultivator rashly enters, there's more than a 50% chance of dying. Thus, after a long time, no one dares to go there anymore. Murong Zhenlu thought for a while, then looked at Knight Sorrow with a worried expression. Towards the 7 forbidden zones, his expression would change at the mention of them. The more dangerous the place, the more opportunities there are. How about this, you lead me to the nearest forbidden zone. After we arrive, I'll send you and Linger back. Then, I'll go back in myself. Knight Sorrow looked at Murong Zhenlu and said. The death rate of the forbidden zones was too high. He did not want Murong Zhenlu and Cao Linger to take the risk. He was prepared to send them back and enter himself. There were still a few decades left before the battle for luck. Other than the 7 forbidden zones, the hunting zone was either controlled by tribes or plundered. There were not many desolate beasts or resources. Relatively speaking, it was already considered very barren. Wanting to quickly accumulate materials or resources was simply not realistic. Brother Yi, what are you saying? We came out together. How can you say that I'll retreat first? Hearing Knight Sorrow's words, Murong Zhenlu was a little unwilling. He retorted and pointed to a mountain peak in the distance. That's the closest forbidden zone to us. It's called Mass Burial Peak. Although it looks like a mountain peak, once you get close, you'll enter another space. In that space, there are large amounts of desolate beasts and resources. Furthermore, there are other hidden dangers. I'm not willing to let you and Linger take the risk. Looking at Mass Burial Peak, Night Sorrow sighed and continued, lead the way. Tell me everything you know. Mass Burial Peak is the closest forbidden zone to the God realm. Relatively speaking, the death rate is relatively lower. Its specialty is that the desolate beasts are densely distributed. If you don't form a group of 5 or more people, it'll be very difficult to fight. If I let you go in alone, how can I be at ease? Murong Jinlu explained all the characteristics of Mass Burial Peak. However, he helplessly expressed that the current God realm's understanding of Mass Burial Peak was only the tip of the iceberg. After all, the ruler of the God realm did not investigate Mass Burial Peak in depth. Let's go nearby and observe first. If it's too dangerous, I'll send you and Linger back. I'll go in myself. As he spoke, Yishang and Murong pointed the way towards Disorderly Burial Peak. The closer they got to Mass Burial Peak, the more desolate beasts they encountered. After killing 2 heaven-defying fire blades and a dragon claw skeleton, Murong Jinlu said, Brother Yi, look around the Forbidden Zone. There are a lot of desolate beasts. Why don't we hunt them nearby and go back to exchange for materials and resources? The materials and resources in the God realm are fixed. They're all placed there by the sovereigns. If we exchange for them, there'll be a corresponding decrease. Why don't we think of a way to find the materials and resources ourselves? Night Sorrow said and continued, when we get close to the Forbidden Zone, the number of desolate beasts will increase. If we go in, it'll be even more dangerous. I'll send you and Linger back and go in myself. After saying that, Night Sorrow sent Murong Jinlu and Cao Linger back to Peace City. Chapter 2885. On his way back, Night Sorrow had made some preparations. He knew that the number of desolate beasts around the Forbidden Zone was increasing. After entering the Forbidden Zone, it was even more obvious. When he was 50,000 kilometers away from the Forbidden Zone, the number of desolate beasts at the foot of the mountain gradually increased. In some areas, groups of desolate beasts appeared. The most terrifying of them all were the heaven-devouring ants. Each of them was the size of an ordinary tiger or leopard. Although they were small compared to other desolate beasts and were all at the level of the Divine King, they were made up of tens of thousands of heaven-devouring ants. Wherever they passed, anything that smelled of blood would be eaten to the bone. These heaven-devouring ants really can't be provoked. Fortunately, they didn't block the entrance to the Forbidden Zone. Seeing the heaven-devouring ants instantly eat a heaven-defying fire blade into a skeleton, Night Sorrow could not help but feel a chill. These heaven-devouring ants could not be resisted in a normal battle. Special methods were needed to deal with them. However, Night Sorrow was in the dark and could choose another route. With the heaven-devouring ants occupying one area, he quickly changed directions. However, Night Sorrow soon discovered another group. This was a group of mountain demons. Compared to the heaven-devouring ants, there were not many of them. There were about a dozen of them, but the area they occupied was not smaller than the heaven-devouring ants. These mountain-piercing demons looked like standing pangolins, but also like standing earth dragons. Their bodies seemed to be made of silver water, and when they stood up, they looked like small mountains. Each of their auras was at the ruler level. It's not easy to provoke so many mountain demons at once. Night Sorrow observed for a while and discovered that the mountain demons' territory was adjacent to the heaven-devouring ants. The two groups had completely blocked off the path. Knowing that the mountain demons were not easy to deal with, Night Sorrow continued to take a detour. In the end, he discovered that in addition to the mountain demons and heaven-devouring ants, there were also dragon claw skeletons and heaven-defying fireblade groups. These four groups were all connected and blocked off the path to Disorderly Burial Peak. This shouldn't be. If it was like this before, he would have told me to give directions. According to him, entering disorderly burial peak shouldn't be so difficult. Observing the various races, Yi Shang was a little confused about what was happening. At this time, he thought of Ji Yun, who was in the space grotto heaven. He transmitted his voice to Ji Yun. Do you know anything about the Forbidden Zone? My brother won't let you off. However, after Night Sorrow asked Ji Yun to speak, he immediately said this. Hearing this, Night Sorrow was speechless. No matter how powerful your brother is, he's still your brother. It has nothing to do with you. You are now a prisoner, although you may be killed. I hope you understand your situation. Clearly, Ji Yun had been spoiled rotten in celestial immortal world. It was easy to use his elder brother's or father's name, but there was no one who would spoil him. Humph. You don't dare to kill me. At most, you can imprison me and wait for my elder brother to come and fetch me. Don't forget how trashy your divine realm is. But Ji Yun had an indifferent look on his face. He didn't care at all. Even under such circumstances, he still didn't take the territory of the God realm seriously. He was truly arrogant. I think you've really been spoiled rotten. Now, I'll give you two options. 1. Go out and be my bait to attract the attention of the sky-devouring ants. 2. Help me figure out what's going on. Why is it so difficult for the mass burial wasps to enter? Night Sorrow threatened noncommittally. He didn't care about Ji Yun's elder brother and father at all. The strong were born fearless. If they were scared to death because of a ruler ranked in the top 1,000, then there was no need to continue cultivating. Humph. Trying to scare me with the sky-devouring ants. I, Ji Yun, lend you some guts. Let's see if you dare. Trash from the divine realm. Despite being threatened, Ji Yun still had an indifferent expression on his face. He clearly had great confidence in his elder brother and father. You really won't shed tears until you see the coffin. I didn't want to use you as bait, but since you're so stubborn, there's no point in keeping you. Remember, if there's a next life, don't be so arrogant. Although my divine realm isn't strong, it's not something you and your elder brother can scare off. Today, I'll leave a fragment of your soul so that you can witness the rise of my divine realm in the future. Night Sorrow wasn't a cruel person, but Ji Yun, a mere prisoner, had repeatedly looked down on his divine realm territory. This made him furious. If he still didn't dare to attack Ji Yun under such circumstances, then he would be too cowardly. Stealing his heart, Night Sorrow left a fragment of Ji Yun's soul and undid half of his seal. Then, he threw him into the sky-devouring ants' territory. Seeing that there was food, the sky-devouring ants immediately moved, covering the sky as they chased after Ji Yun. Although the sky-devouring ants weren't very large, and none of them were rulers, when they moved, they covered the sky and covered the earth. They could even fly. Damn it! How dare you do this to me? If I, Ji Yun, survive today, I'll make my father wash your divine realm territory with blood. After being thrown into the sky-devouring ants' territory by Night Sorrow, Ji Yun finally felt fear. After cursing Night Sorrow, he began to run frantically towards Night Sorrow's location. He wanted to lure the sky-devouring ants to Night Sorrow's location. Knowing how powerful the sky-devouring ants were, Ji Yun no longer hoped to escape. He only hoped that he could kill Night Sorrow. Hee. It's just as I thought. At this time, Night Sorrow appeared in another location. Before he released Ji Yun, he had already set up a formation to confuse Ji Yun's location. At this time, Ji Yun didn't even know where to go, so he could help Night Sorrow lure the sky-devouring ants away. Taking advantage of the fact that the sky-devouring ants were lured away, Night Sorrow took the opportunity to invade their territory and rush towards the entrance of the mass burial bees. Something must be wrong if something was wrong. He felt that since the mass burial bee's territory was so tightly guarded, something must have happened inside. Perhaps a rare treasure had appeared. Logically speaking, the sky-devouring ants should have a sovereign rank leader. However, there isn't one in their territory. It's very likely that they've entered the mass burial bees. After entering the sky-devouring ants' territory, Knight Sorrow had been using his god's soul to investigate the movements of the sky-devouring ants, in case there was a sovereign rank leader. However, after a round of investigation, he didn't find anything out of the ordinary. By now, Ji-Yun had already been surrounded by the heaven-devouring ants. Knight Sorrow undid all of his seals and transmitted, "If you can survive, I'll let bygones be bygones for trespassing on the God Realm's territory. You're despicable." Ji-Yun was furious that Knight Sorrow had used him as bait to lure the tiger away from the mountain. However, facing the sky-devouring ants, with his spatial artifact left behind by Knight Sorrow, he was powerless. Chapter 2886. Knight Sorrow did not pay attention to Ji-Yun after entering the disorderly burial peak. However, from Ji-Yun's remnant soul, he knew that Ji-Yun's fate was extremely miserable. Knight Sorrow did not have the energy to think about it. Because after entering the disorderly burial peak's forbidden area, he felt a dense oppressive aura. Even the air became austere. Even though Knight Sorrow had been fighting for so long, he still felt his scalp go numb. Standing at the edge of the forbidden area, Knight Sorrow saw an endless mountain range and a large number of spatial cracks. The aura of the spatial cracks gave people a terrifying feeling. It did not seem to be the dominator rank, but the power of the sovereign realm. At the entrance of the disorderly burial peak, there was a large number of corpses. A portion of them were from the 4 major races that Knight Sorrow was familiar with. The other portion was something he had never seen before, but he had heard Murong Junlu describe them. These corpses should be the corpses of the leaders of the 4 major races outside. When they attacked, they alarmed the creatures in the forbidden area, causing a great battle. After analyzing Knight Sorrow, he immediately understood what had happened. This made him very happy. 34 creatures in the nearby forbidden area had died. Every one of them was a dominator rank. If not for the leaders of the 4 major races leading their people to attack, Knight Sorrow would not be a match for them alone. According to Murong Junlu, although the forbidden area is very dangerous, it should not be to the extent of encountering dozens of dire beasts right after entering. Knight Sorrow did not leave immediately. Instead, he kept the slightly complete dire beast corpses and those that could be used as materials into his spatial artifact. These materials might not mean much to a desolate beast, but any cultivator in the firmament would be able to make use of them. It was a huge haul. After collecting all the useful materials, Knight Sorrow used the sea serpent's eye to observe the surrounding terrain. As for the power of his consciousness, he did not release it casually. This was because he was not sure what kind of dire beasts were in the forbidden area. He was afraid that if he carelessly released his spiritual energy, it would cause unnecessary trouble. Because there were 4 leaders of the 4 major territories, Knight Sorrow had been following their tracks all the way to the depths of the forbidden area, which was the mountain range. When Knight Sorrow truly stepped into chaotic burial peak, he could not help but feel his hair stand on end. He felt extremely flustered. That feeling was like a newborn deer being stared at by a colorful tiger. If the other party attacked, Xiaolu would not be able to resist at all. Knight Sorrow's heart skipped a beat as he said, "How is this possible? Is there someone surpassing the 9 heavens supreme realm in the forbidden area? I've never heard the hegemons mention that the eternal autarch realm has an existence that surpasses the autarch level." Yishang's heart was extremely desolate. Even his hands were trembling. This was a fear he had never felt since he started cultivating. It even made him want to leave. However, just as Knight Sorrow was about to leave, this heart-palpitating feeling suddenly disappeared. The feeling of being stared at completely disappeared. What remained was the original oppressive aura of the forbidden area. Yishang took a deep breath and thought to himself, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Since that terrifying aura wasn't targeting him, then he might as well go deeper. Ow! Just as Night Sorrow was pondering, a huge golden devil kuei suddenly charged towards Night Sorrow from the forest. This golden devil kuei was about 300 feet tall. Its entire body seemed to be made out of gold and was filled with power. Oh! Isn't this the golden desolate beast mentioned by Guiding Lu? It's so easy to encounter. Discovering that the attacking desolate beast was a golden devil kuei, Night Sorrow, who was originally somewhat absent-minded, immediately became excited. According to Murong Guiding Lu, golden desolate beasts were extremely difficult to encounter. After killing them, not only could one obtain a large amount of hegemon rank materials, one could also obtain a trace of luck from the eternal autarch realm. It could be said that killing golden desolate beasts would bring great benefits. However, golden desolate beasts were much stronger than ordinary desolate beasts. When Night Sorrow was condensing his deity domain, he could not help but raise his guard. As for the golden devil kuei in front of him, its realm was lower-level hegemon rank. Relatively speaking, it was not too high. According to Murong Guiding Lu, upper-level hegemon rank golden desolate beasts were basically difficult for hegemon rank cultivators to deal with. Although Night Sorrow's battle strength was astonishing, in a one-on-one fight, he was definitely not its opponent. Boom! The golden devil kuei ferociously attacked. Night Sorrow immediately strengthened his aura and suddenly sent out a palm. After the two of them collided, Night Sorrow discovered that the golden devil kuei that was charging over only stopped its body and did not retreat half a step. Very strong indeed. Although this palm did not contain any attribute, Night Sorrow had already used his full strength and did not hold back in terms of strength. Ow! I'll kill you. The golden devil kuei was at hegemon rank. Its intelligence was very high and it could already speak human language. With a roar, it completely released its deity domain. Its golden body immediately emitted boundless golden light, illuminating the surrounding sky. According to the ancient records, this was a sign that the golden desolate beast was preparing to go all out. It's better for me to kill you. Facing it, Night Sorrow immediately became more focused and prepared to think of a way to quickly kill it. Because in the forbidden area, there must be other desolate beasts. Not to mention the distant ones, if the four great clans appeared together, Night Sorrow would not be able to deal with them. He was afraid that the fierce battle with the golden devil kuei would cause too much of a commotion and attract other dangerous factors. After saying that, Night Sorrow directly activated the 33 Heavens battle secret technique to increase his strength. Then, without hesitation, he used the Divine Origin Trap Array and Reincarnation Spear Art. He turned himself and his deity domain into a huge divine halberd and smashed it towards the golden devil kuei. Boom! The golden devil kuei, who was bound by the Divine Origin Trap Array, was originally very heavy. It could not dodge this attack and was ruthlessly bombarded on its body. However, the golden devil kuei's body seemed to be made of indestructible iron essence. After being bombarded by Night Sorrow, it did not suffer any obvious injuries. It's really strong. No wonder it's known as one of the best materials in the Eternal Supreme World. When the golden devil kuei's attack did not succeed, Night Sorrow hurriedly used the dragon traveling step to dodge the attack. The golden devil kuei's body was too strong. There was no benefit for him to take it head-on. Then, using the flexibility of his body, he began to tangle with the golden devil kuei. However, although his attacks continuously hit the golden desolate beast's body, it was difficult to have a fatal effect. Moreover, using the power of the divine soul to attack was not of much use. This time, Night Sorrow was stumped. For a moment, he did not know how to deal with the golden devil Kuei in front of him. Cultivator, your attack, to me, is just a tickle. Die. Chapter 2887. At the same time, the Golden Devil Leader's eyes shot out two golden lights, directly piercing Knight Soro's eyes. Not good. This kind of light can paralyze the mind. Being illuminated by this light, Knight Soro suddenly found that he was temporarily paralyzed. Oh whoa! Go to hell. After paralyzing Knight Soro, the Golden Devil Leader immediately waved its giant palm and slapped towards Knight Soro. With a clang, Knight Soro was ruthlessly slapped into the ground, creating a huge pit on the hillside. Cough, cough. After suffering the solid palm of the Golden Devil Leader, Knight Soro felt as if his whole body was about to fall apart. This was an experience he had not encountered for a long time, so he immediately used a secret method to recover. You are not dead, you are not the same as other cultivators. At the Divine King realm, he already had such strength and toughness of his body. If you become a servant of this king will spare your life. The Golden Devil Leader was a little surprised that he did not kill Knight Soro with one palm. Then, he opened his mouth and asked Knight Soro to become his servant. Servant. Why don't you be my material? With Knight Soro's character, how could he become a servant of a wild beast? He roared and condensed the power of virtue around his body. Once again, the Golden Devil Leader used the reincarnation spear technique. This attack was different from the previous one. There was no divine essence trapping array, but the Golden Devil Leader still could not dodge it. However, when Knight Soro attacked, the Golden Devil Leader slapped out a powerful palm. In its opinion, although Knight Soro's strength was good, compared to itself, he was still a little weaker. However, the result shocked the Golden Demonic Chieftain. Although Knight Soro's strength was not much different from before, the power of virtue was extremely terrifying and sent it flying. Again. After sending the Golden Devil Leader flying, Knight Soro once again blasted out a palm in a moment. This palm strike was different from the previous one. He had infused the reincarnation attribute into it to complement the power of merit. With a loud rumble, the Golden Devil Kuei, which had been flying through the air, was struck once more and smashed into the ground. The energy of virtue and the energy of samsara wasn't something that he could resist by relying on the strength of his body. So the power of merit has such an effect on desolate beasts. When fighting the desolate beasts outside, Knight Soro did not expend much effort. He did not even use the power of merit. After killing it, the amount of great virtue he obtained was not much. As a result, Knight Soro had neglected the power of virtue. After trying it out, he discovered that the power of virtue was still an important trump card of his. Killing the Golden Demonic Chief and extracting its essence should be enough to create a good Dominator rank divine artifact. I'm really not used to fighting empty-handed. At this point in the battle, Knight Soro had already determined that the Golden Demonic Leader basically had no chance to resist. He continuously suppressed it and killed it with his storm-like attacks. Before it was killed, the Golden Demonic Leader kept begging for mercy. It wanted to be Knight Soro's servant and said that it could introduce the situation of disorderly burial peak to him. Knight Soro was very interested in this, but he did not accept it. With a Golden Demonic Leader on him, he would definitely be targeted by others. It was definitely not worth the loss. As for the matters in the Forbidden Zone, he could ask other desolate beasts. After the Golden Demonic Leader was killed, its body underwent a transformation. It turned into a pile of golden iron essence that overflowed with essence. Even its bones had fused into a huge piece of material. Looking at the material that the Golden Demonic Leader had turned into, Knight Soro nodded with satisfaction. He kept it and prepared to find a place to set up an array to begin refining and refining. Call out the material that the golden demonic beast has turned into. Otherwise, you will be refined into an artifact yourself. At this moment, a cold voice suddenly rang out. When this voice sounded, Knight Sorrow immediately felt as if his whole body was being pricked by needles. Who are you? Although Knight Sorrow felt uncomfortable, it was different from when he had just entered the Forbidden Zone. He knew that the opponent in front of him was not an existence that he could not fight against at all. After collecting the golden demonic leader's material, he turned around and looked at the opponent with the sea serpent eye. He realized that it was a three-eyed cultivator. I am from the Celestial Eye territory. You are a cultivator from the realm of gods, right? Hand over the material that you have just collected and I can spare your life. The three-eyed cultivator from the Celestial Eye territory looked coldly at Knight Sorrow as if he was looking at a dead man. Another child of fortune. You also entered Disorderly Burial Peak from the realm of gods. Knight Sorrow said coldly as he looked at the three-eyed cultivator from the Celestial Eye territory. Although the realm of gods was currently very weak, the continuous appearance of cultivators from other territories had made him very unhappy. Humph. Your realm of gods has no luck. It is your honor that I am here to take the treasure. You are lucky. I am Tong Qing and I am ranked in the top 2000 of the Sovereign Board. Tong Qing had obviously seen the battle between Knight Sorrow and the golden demonic leader. She did not find his cultivation level as a divine king to be laughable. However, she was still extremely arrogant. It was obvious that she felt that her strength was superior. I understand now. Your eyes are very special. You are able to observe my battle from a distance that I cannot detect. Knight Sorrow sized up Tong Qing and quickly guessed what was going on. Usually, if a cultivator was observing his battle from a close distance, he would definitely be able to detect it. This Tong Qing obviously had a good eye technique. She had seen the battle between the golden demonic leader from a long distance away and rushed over. However, she was a little late and just in time for Knight Sorrow to collect the material that the golden demonic leader had turned into. So what if you understand? With your strength, you are no match for me. Hand over the material that the golden demonic leader has turned into or I will kill you immediately. Tong Qing's words were filled with contempt and coldness. You barged into the hunting area of the realm of gods for no reason and even dared to threaten the cultivators of the realm of gods. In your eyes, do you think that the realm of gods is easy to bully? Knight Sorrow had seen people kill others and steal their treasures. He did not think much of it. What he was angry about was that Tong Qing was looking down on the realm of gods. The realm of gods is easy to bully. You are all a bunch of trash. You have some potential. However, if you dare to question me, what awaits you is endless torture. Tong Qing shouted arrogantly. She used her third eye to size up Knight Sorrow as if she wanted to see through him. However, with the protection of the power of merit, she could not see through Tong Qing. If the realm of gods is filled with trash, then you are even worse than trash. Today, I, Knight Sorrow, will let you and the others who trespass into the realm of gods know that you have to pay the price for coming here. Tong Qing's attitude was very arrogant. Knight Sorrow was completely enraged. Chapter 2888. Ha ha ha. What a joke. You, a divine king, want to reverse everything and protect the entire realm of the gods. Do you have the strength to do that? Clear disdain appeared on Tong Qing's face when he saw Yi Shang's attitude. In his opinion, it was praiseworthy for Yi Shang to be able to defeat the golden demonic leader as a god king. However, in Tong Qing's eyes, Knight Sorrow was too confident. He did not believe that there was anyone who could reverse yin and yang in the current state of the realm of the gods. If you don't even have the heart to protect the realm of the gods, you will be destroyed. Yi Shang roared and continued, let's not talk that far. I'll deal with you first, intruder. Kill me first. Let me kill you first. Do you really think that by relying on middle-level Divine King strength, you can fight with this seat? Wind Thunder Celestial Eye Technique. Tong Ching said disdainfully. He then used his eye technique and shot it at Night Sorrow. The eye technique that he used was from two normal eyes. One of his eyes used the wind elemental attack while the other used the lightning elemental attack. Although the two elemental attacks were not too terrifying, they were powerful. When the two rays of light shone on him, Night Sorrow felt a pressure that was different from before. It turned out that this eye technique did not only use divine origin energy to attack, it could also attack one's divine soul. Not bad. I wonder how it can damage my divine soul. Night Sorrow was not used to Tong Ching's eye technique. He felt that his divine soul was being attacked and he felt a little dizzy. However, his divine soul was stronger than ordinary people. Although he felt uncomfortable, he was still able to withstand it. However, Night Sorrow did not understand why Tong Ching's eye technique would affect his divine soul. He did not feel that his divine soul was being attacked. This was strange. Humph. You don't understand, right? There are many things that you don't understand. Rookie in the realm of the gods. This attack dealt a certain amount of damage to Night Sorrow. Tong Ching laughed arrogantly and said, I thought you would have a certain level of strength since you were able to defeat the Golden Demon Leader. I didn't expect you to be so weak. Let's end this battle as soon as possible in order to avoid trouble. Tong Ching yelled, Ruler's Immortal Eye Technique. In an instant, all three of his eyes shone brightly. These three rays of light all contained a strange power that could destroy heaven and earth. This was a power that Night Sorrow had never seen before. What power is this? Night Sorrow was astonished when he saw the three beams of light that seemed to contain an endless amount of strange energy. He was proficient in all kinds of attributes, but he had never seen this kind of attack before, so he wasn't sure how to defend against it. Thus, he could only activate the 33 Heaven Secret Combat technique once more. After increasing his strength, he created a Divine Essence trapping formation around himself. However, the Divine Essence trapping formation that he cast did not block the other party's ocular art. The three rays of light that shot out from Tong Ching's eyes instantly penetrated the sealed space and landed on Night Sorrow's body. After being hit by the rays of light, Night Sorrow instantly felt as though he was an ordinary person who had been struck by lightning. Both his body and spiritual body were extremely uncomfortable. Cough, cough. Even though Night Sorrow's body was extremely tough, he was still severely injured by this attack. Hee hee. A frog at the bottom of a well. Don't you find it strange? What kind of power is this? Now, let me tell you. This is the Immortal Eye technique rewarded by the Immortal Eye territory. Your realm of the gods is about to run out of luck. You have just killed the Golden Demon Leader, but the realm of the gods did not give you a reward. Do you still not understand what is going on? Seeing that Night Sorrow was severely injured, Tong Ching explained the source of his power with disdain. Originally, his strength was not considered strong among the sovereigns in the Eternal Supreme World. However, with the power of the Immortal Eye, it was completely different. He had relied on this trump card to obtain his current ranking among the sovereigns. In the Eternal Supreme World, there were a total of tens of thousands of realms. The top sovereigns in each realm were 10,000 people. For Tong Ching to be ranked in the top 2,000, he was obviously not a simple person. He looked down on the current realm of the gods and came here to search for treasures without any scruples. There was still some barrier in his strength. So it is the power of the realm of the gods. It is similar to the origin energy of the gods. It seems that the stronger the luck of the realm of the gods, the greater the reward and strength of the cultivator. My realm of the gods no longer has any realm of the gods to reward cultivators. However, I can obtain the power of merit. Although it is affected, it can still increase my strength rapidly. When Knight Sorrow heard Tong Qing's words, he immediately understood what kind of power was contained in the eye technique that he had used. He also knew how weak the realm of the gods had become. It was now the autumn of life and death. However, he had just killed the golden demon leader. Although he did not obtain the reward of the realm of the gods, he had obtained a lot of power of merit. Knight Sorrow's heart was suddenly filled with boundless confidence. In the eternal supreme world, he still had to walk the path of merit. Ha! Why are you in a daze? Are you feeling very hopeless? That's right. Your realm of the gods is about to fall. Despair. When Knight Sorrow was thinking about the problem, Tong Qing thought that he had suffered a blow and immediately began to mock him. Hopeless. I am not hopeless. There is a saying that goes, heaven is strong, and a gentleman will strive to improve himself. As cultivators, there is no need for us to rely on the power of the realm of the gods. When Knight Sorrow said this, a strong power of merit bloomed around his body. In the battle with Tong Qing, he was indeed at a disadvantage. However, his strong belief kept him from feeling hopeless. You are an interesting person. You have deceived yourself to this extent. I have changed my mind. I will not kill you. I will imprison you as a slave. When Tong Qing saw Knight Sorrow's reaction, she felt that she was looking at a fool who was sitting at the bottom of a well. Your greatest achievement is to rely on the power of the realm of the gods to enter the top 2,000 of the sovereigns in the eternal supreme world. I am not. There is some boldness that you do not understand. Kill. Knight Sorrow could completely see through Tong Qing's thoughts. However, he was not weaker than anyone else. He was not after the top 2,000 or the top 1,000. He was after something big. After shouting the word kill, Knight Sorrow gathered the power of reincarnation in his left hand and the power of primordial in his right hand. He also used the power of merit to protect himself. He activated the power of bloodline and used the dragon swimming steps to get closer to Tong Qing. Knight Sorrow judged that although Tong Qing's eye technique was powerful, her close combat skills were definitely not strong. If he were to fight head-on, his secret skill would definitely not be as powerful as Tong Qing's. In that case, he might as well use the most primitive way of fighting. Close combat to kill. You want to get close to me and engage in close combat. You are thinking too much. Power of the celestial eyes. Destroy. When Tong Qing saw Knight Sorrow getting closer to her, she immediately became alert and used the power of the celestial eyes again. Chapter 2889. The eye technique transformed the power of the immortal eyes into a destructive force. It was a deadly attack. It was obvious that Tong Qing was only trying to distract Knight Sorrow when he said he wanted to imprison him. His real intention was to kill him and steal his treasures. The materials that the golden demon leader had turned into could be used to refine a ruler artifact, which could be used until the 9 heavens supreme realm. Any ruler would be jealous of it. Tong Qing was good at eye techniques, but he could use them to refine a defensive artifact. Not bad, but you've used similar eye techniques over and over again. How could I not see through them? You lost because you were too confident. You didn't use your strongest eye technique at the beginning. Yi Shan hadn't been able to dodge Tong Qing's previous attacks. This had led Tong Qing to believe that his eye technique couldn't be broken. However, Knight Sorrow had the help of the sea serpent's eye and a lot of battle experience. How could he be suppressed by the same attack? When Tong Qing executed his strongest attack, Knight Sorrow had already seen through it. He successfully dodged the attack and closed the distance between them. God Origin Trap Formation. After closing the distance, Night Sorrow first executed the God Origin trap formation before engaging in close combat with Tong Qing. You will soon understand that in a battle of life and death, the most important thing is to rely on one's own strength. Night Sorrow yelled in the midst of the battle. His left and right hands were accumulating the forbidden force and were protected by the force of good fortune. In addition, Tong Qing was not good at close combat. The outcome of the battle was obvious. After fighting for a while, Tong Qing could not even find a chance to break free from the God Origin trap formation. Impossible. How did you dodge my eye technique? Tong Qing had no idea how Night Sorrow had managed to dodge his strongest eye technique after closing the distance between them. Every attack has its own trajectory. I've already seen through yours. Night Sorrow's eyes glittered as he said this. His sea serpent's eye played a crucial role in the battle. I'll give you a chance. If you leave now, I'll pretend that nothing happened. Feeling that she was completely powerless against Night Sorrow, Tong Qing immediately threatened him. Hearing this, Night Sorrow laughed speechlessly. Do you think we're playing house? Die. As soon as she finished speaking, Night Sorrow broke Tong Qing's left arm. I am the #1 ruler of the Immortal Eye territory. If you kill me, the entire Immortal Eye territory will take revenge on the God World territory. If you kill me, you will lose more than you gain. Since Tong Qing's threat did not work, she immediately changed her tone and asked Night Sorrow to weigh the pros and cons. It's useless for you to say such things. Those who invade the territory of the celestial realm will be killed no matter how far away they are. Die. Night Sorrow didn't care about this at all. He didn't give Tong Qing a chance to speak and killed her directly. After Tong Qing was killed, it was different from when the golden demonic leader was killed. She immediately turned into a large amount of sovereign law and essence. If I absorb all of this, I might be able to advance to the upper divine king level, but I don't have enough time. What is this? Her third eye. After killing Tong Qing, most of her body had been turned into nomological laws and essence. However, his third eye had been perfectly preserved. After keeping the sovereign law and essence, Night Sorrow immediately dug a cave nearby and set up an array. Then, he started to study Tong Qing's third eye. Soon, he felt that his eyes had a desire to devour the third eye. Immediately, he used his eyes to absorb the essence in the third eye. After absorbing all the essence in Tong Qing's third eye, Night Sorrow's eyes, which had been strengthened by the sea serpent's eye, became even sharper. Moreover, he could see much further than before. No wonder Tong Qing could see the battle between the golden demonic leader and me. She could see so far and could even see through obstacles. After testing it out, Night Sorrow realized that as long as he infused his divine origin force, his eyes could see very far and could even see through ordinary obstacles. The effect was even better than using his spiritual strength. This was because if he used his spiritual strength to investigate, he would be discovered by others. However, if he were to observe from a distance, he might not be discovered. Great! The sea serpent's eye is suitable for use in the forbidden area. I wonder if it can see through some restrictions. After thinking for a while, Night Sorrow put the sea serpent's eye aside for the time being. He took out the materials that the golden demonic leader had turned into and started to forge the Samsara halberd. In the end, he forged a golden heavenly halberd. Although the golden heavenly halberd is tough enough, it lacks some attributes. I will continue to forge it after I find enough materials. After naming the divine weapon Golden Heavenly Halberd, Night Sorrow removed the seal of the cave and continued to follow the footsteps of the 4 wild beasts. He headed deep into the forbidden area. The evolved sea serpent's eye played an important role in this. It could often find clues when Night Sorrow lost track of the wild beasts. About a month later, after killing a few wild beasts that were left alone, Night Sorrow finally caught up with the 4 wild beasts that had been moving forward. The mountain demon, heaven-devouring ant, dragon claw skeleton, and heaven-defying fire blade. The 4 wild beasts were all gathered at the foot of the mountain. However, they stopped at the foot of the mountain. Through his observation, Night Sorrow discovered that the leaders of the 4 wild beasts were all middle-level sovereigns. They were all golden wild beasts. The 4 golden wild beasts each lead a large number of wild beasts. Among them, there are about 10,000 heaven-devouring ant. The mountain demon, dragon claw skeleton, heaven-defying fire blade, and about 10 sovereigns. Such a lineup is really powerful. But what are they waiting for at the foot of the mountain? Night Sorrow, who was observing the 4 races from afar with the sea serpent's eye, was extremely nervous. If he was discovered in such a situation, the consequences would be unimaginable. However, after observing for a long time, the 4 wild beasts did not make any movements. There was also nothing unusual about the mountain in front of them. After using the sea serpent's eye to observe other directions, Night Sorrow discovered more than 20 cultivators from other domains. These people were divided into 5 camps. The smallest camp had 3 cultivators who were hiding in the distance and observing the 4 wild beasts. It seems that I am alone. This should be the central region of Disorderly Burial Peak. It can't be the legendary Disorderly Burial Peak, right? After thinking for a moment, a thought flashed through Night Sorrow's mind. He had heard a bit about Disorderly Burial Peak from Murong. It seemed that every few years, some good things would appear at Disorderly Burial Peak. However, Murong had only heard about this from some sovereigns. Some sovereigns had come to Disorderly Burial Peak when they were sovereigns and obtained some resources. Chapter 2890. Although Night Sorrow did not know the exact situation of Disorderly Burial Peak, the current situation showed that there was definitely something good on the peak. This was not only shown by the 4 desolate beast races and the cultivators from the other domains. This was because the other desolate beast races in the Forbidden Zone had all retreated to the peak in front of him. This was also the reason why Night Sorrow did not encounter any desolate beasts along the way. I'm not sure what's up with that golden demonic leader. Night Sorrow felt that his luck was not bad to encounter a lone golden demonic leader when most of the desolate beast races in the Forbidden Zone had retreated to Disorderly Burial Peak. While Night Sorrow was lurking, a small team of 4 from one of the domains began to move towards Disorderly Burial Peak. They had concealment runes on their bodies and their auras were very weak. If one did not look carefully, one would not be able to see them. However, Night Sorrow had already used the sea serpent's eye to discover them. Night Sorrow kept an eye on them while being wary of others. Soon, the 4 of them went around the 4 desolate beast races at the foot of the mountain and moved towards the middle of Disorderly Burial Peak. Their whereabouts were very secretive. The 4 desolate beast races at the foot of the mountain did not discover them at all. However, Night Sorrow laughed. This was because he saw a large number of desolate beasts hiding in the forest that the 4 of them had sneaked into. Among them, there was even a golden desolate beast leader at the middle-level dominator realm. Roar! Not long after, the 4 of them encountered a group of desolate beasts in the forest. These desolate beasts were a type of desolate beast called Disorderly Burial Tiger. They all had the appearance of a tiger with a human body. Other than the golden desolate beast leader, there were more than 20 dominator realm desolate beasts. These desolate beasts were obviously different from the desolate beasts of the 4 desolate beast races, such as the mountain demon, heaven-devouring ant, dragon claw skeleton, and heaven-defying fire blade. Even ordinary desolate beasts had 30% to 50% of the golden bloodline. They were much stronger than the ordinary desolate beasts of the 4 desolate beast races. They were completely at the elite level. The 4 cultivators who had sneaked in were from an unknown domain. They were relatively strong. Against such a lineup, they actually had an earth-shattering battle. Especially the female cultivator leading the group, who had a silver horn on her head, was actually evenly matched with the golden disorderly burial tiger. This golden burial tiger beast king was clearly stronger than the golden demonic lord that Night Sorrow had killed. After all, the golden devil chieftain was only a lesser dominator-rank golden desolate beast, while the golden burial tiger had the strength of an intermediate dominator rank. According to Night Sorrow's judgment, the female cultivator with a silver horn on her head should be much stronger than Tongqing. At the very least, she could be ranked in the top 1,000 of the sovereign list in the eternal supreme world. However, this was only an estimate, and the specifics were not too accurate. However, although the female cultivator with a silver horn on her head was very strong, her three companions were obviously no match for the other tigers. After a while, one of them was killed, and they began to show signs of defeat. Not long after, while the silver-horned female cultivator was restrained, her companions were all torn apart by the mass burial tiger, turning into rules and essences that filled the sky. And these mass burial pyro tigers, after killing the silver-horned female cultivator's companion, attacked the silver-horned female cultivator together. This silver-horned female cultivator is dead for sure. It's a pity that they didn't cause much trouble. Night Sorrow saw that the silver-horned female cultivator was surrounded by a large number of mass burial tiger, and felt that her chances of survival were basically zero. He originally thought that after the other party attacked, the 4 desolate beast races below would move. However, the reality was different from what he imagined. The 4 golden desolate beast leaders did not move at all. They did not even pay much attention to the battle at the mountainside. Oh. You actually escaped under such circumstances. You're really strong, but you better not let me meet you. At this moment, Night Sorrow saw that the silver-horned female cultivator used the horn on her head to shine a ray of light into the sky. She followed the light and disappeared into the horizon instantly. Even when Night Sorrow started using the sea serpent's eye, he could not see any trace of the silver-horned female cultivator. Night Sorrow admired this silver-horned female cultivator, but she was also an intruder. To him, she was someone who should be killed without mercy. Boom! Just when Night Sorrow started using the sea serpent's eye to find the female cultivator's location, there was a sudden muffled thunder. There was only the sound of thunder, but no lightning. After the thunder sounded, the golden desolate beast leaders of the 4 golden desolate beast races all moved. They immediately released their powerful divine domains. Clearly, they were preparing to attack. What does this thunder mean? Night Sorrow knew that the 4 desolate beast races were definitely preparing to go up the mountain. He did not understand the cause and effect of this, but he knew that everyone in the world was here for profit. Something good must have appeared on the mountain. Hence, he made preparations. However, including the teams from the other territories, Night Sorrow's overall strength was definitely the worst. He felt that he should observe the situation after everyone else attacked before deciding whether to go up the mountain. Boom! 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 When Night Sorrow decided what to do, the muffled thunder started to become more frequent. The 4 desolate beast races at the foot of the mountain also started to become restless. Clearly, they were preparing to attack. That's not right. This doesn't sound like thunder, but more like the heartbeat of some creature. What kind of creature is it that has such a terrifying heartbeat? Could it be that a super powerful creature is awakening? Soon, Night Sorrow realized that something was wrong. Although the sound coming from the top of the mountain sounded like thunder, it was like the sound of a heartbeat. However, the frequency of the sound was very similar to the sound of a heartbeat. After thinking about it, he was shocked. At the same time, he recalled the feeling of being stared at by beasts when he first entered the forbidden area of Disorderly Burial Peak. He increasingly felt that there might be an irresistible dominator-level existence on Disorderly Burial Peak. However, it might be in a deep sleep, but the heartbeat proved that it might be awakening. And the actions of the desolate beasts and cultivators from the other territories made Night Sorrow guess that this super powerful creature might bring a lot of opportunities during its temporary awakening. Otherwise, these desolate beasts and cultivators from the other territories would not be so eager. Boom! 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 While Night Sorrow was thinking about the possibilities, the sound coming from the top of Disorderly Burial Peak became more and more frequent. The thumping sound sounded more and more like a heartbeat. Awoo! Charge! At this moment, the 4 desolate beast races that were originally restless under Disorderly Burial Peak suddenly charged up the mountain under the command of the Golden Heaven-defying Fireblade leader. After they charged out, the cultivators from the other territories did not make a move. And when the 4 desolate beast races charged up the mountain, Disorderly Burial Peak suddenly erupted like a volcano, spewing out a large amount of golden essence. This golden essence sputtered out. Whether it was the 4 desolate beast races that charged up or the other desolate beast races that were originally hiding on the mountain, they all went crazy. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.